Welcome to another episode of the Soothing Semantics podcast. I am your host, Rafi Pinsky. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, leave your comments for all of your real estate needs in South Florida. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at Rafi the Realtor. Check out my weekly newsletter for everything real estate in the south of Florida. So I'd be happy to help you with anything residential. And you can reach out for anything commercial as well, and I'll be happy to do my best. So without further ado, we have Mr. Playing with Fire, Alex Valenchik. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yeah, close enough.
How do I say it?
It's the proper Russian way of saying is Valenchik. Fuck it. It's been so long. Valenchik.
Okay. So
it's a little bit of different like abbreviation, but I'm so American that I just say it the American
yeah,
way. Valenchik.
He is from the Russian mountains of Brickell, and a very mountainous terrain. He has a show called Playing with Fire. It is a show that helps men pick up women, hopefully not just detain but retain women. I've watched a decent amount of your videos. I've seen you before, man. I've seen you on the Saucecast. You definitely have interesting things to say. And I see that you have shifted not too long ago into the political space. So definitely something I want to.
I was always just, yeah, you're basically correct. I started more publicly doing, but I was always really into politics like my whole life. It's just that I've got opportunities like a year ago to actually talk about it, because before then, all I knew was other POAs. But now like I met Destiny, I could talk about politics with him, and then I linked up with Vosh, virtually, of course, to talk about politics with him. Although obviously he's in some hot water now for some of the fucking pedophile shit. But yeah, so I've always enjoyed politics.
Okay. So this was unbeknownst to me. So anyhow, thank you for joining me. We're going to get into Israel Palestine. I know your father's side is Jewish, and mother's side is not. So you are definitely you have the Jew in you. So we shall get started. So firstly, we had a couple of things I wanted to go over, and let me quickly I just want to quickly review it.
Do you want to maybe quickly recap how we met in like the initial debate, or you just want to focus on new stuff?
I mean, that's let's skim through that quickly. We met on the Saucecast. We had a 4-on-4 debate. We both agree that there were too many people on the panel. There were too many interruptions. There wasn't enough time for each person to get a word in. There was, some people really did most of the talking, and I don't think we really got too far. I mean, I said some points that were very necessary. In the short time that I spoke, I made sure to summarize what I felt was really the underlying issue of the underlying cause of the fighting. And we're here, Alex and I are here to hopefully get into things on a deeper level, so you can both hear and understand how we see the conflict and the war.
Yeah, I just want to add, me and you collectively got about 5% of the talking time.
Probably, dude. Yeah. All right. So to start, and I'm going to ask you some of these questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Why do you think Israelis and Palestinians are fighting?
Well, I think there's no simple answer to that, but I think there's a lot of factors. I think that the saying "blood begets blood" is true. So you have one side, like if we only have to go that far back, we look at something like the Second Intifada, right? That really, I think, changed politics in Israel, and understandably so. And then you just have cycles of blood. Then you have the 2017, the March of Return, where a bunch of Palestinian civilians got killed. And so you have a cycle of blood begets blood. I think you have two groups of people living on territory that's disputed, and they can't agree. Some feel that territory belongs to them. Some feel the territory belongs to them. I think the Palestinians feel like that they're being they're being basically either ethnically, what's the term? Ethnically
cleansed.
Ethnically cleansed, or they feel like something is even being stolen from them. And then I think you have Israelis feeling like these guys are terrorists, that like we can't let our guard down.
By the way, was that a trick? Was that a sly little trick to get me to say ethnically cleansed?
No. I just legitimately forgot the word for a second. I've had a long day. But so you have
like cut that out. Yeah.
you have multiple grievances on both sides, and I think both sides have legitimate grievances. I don't take the position that, for example, it's only the Palestinians that have legitimate grievances. I think Israelis have very legitimate grievances, and I think Palestinians have very legitimate grievances. And I think that now you have extremism on both sides. I think the closest that this whole thing has ever come to being resolved was the Camp David Accords under Clinton. I think that was probably the closest the Middle East got to a friendly two-state solution. It was a shame that the Palestinian, the head of the PLO at the time, did not accept that. I think that deal would have been good for everybody. But then also you have, for example, the Israeli side not accepting the Arab Peace Initiative, which I was believe in 1992. So you've had different in Israel. Obviously, it's a democratic country. You've had different prime ministers. Some of them a lot more friendly to Palestinians, some of them not. Netanyahu being an example. So yeah, I just think it's a very, very complex issue where both sides have legitimate grievances, and also you have cycle of blood, right? You have just like one side does something bad to the other side, and then that side doesn't forget, and then they return the favor, and on and on. Again, the saying "blood begets blood" is a very true saying.
Okay, no, I completely I completely understand what you mean by the blood begets blood. Are you of the belief, though, that ultimately all land has been conquered at some point or another? And do you believe all is fair in love and war? And do you also believe that the victor of war gets the spoils? Like, do you believe in these basic principles, or is it a lot more complex? Where do you kind of see yourself?
Let's go through these one at a time. So the first one you said was all territory at some point has been conquered, right?
Yes, yes.
I think a lot of territory has been conquered. For example, America conquered America, right? That was the British largely. They conquered, the land belonged to Native Americans. Now it's American land. I mean, we conquered Texas, right? Like America conquered Texas, took it from Mexico. But then you have other territories, like for example, as far as I'm aware, China has always belonged to Chinese people. Again, parts of China have been conquered, like Tibet, but general mainland China has been mainland China. Mainland Russia has been belonged to the Russians. So I think some territory has been conquered, some has not been. To answer your first question, what was the second question?
Second question, I have to look through it, but to my knowledge, most lands have been conquered at some point.
Well, like
Another
China and Russia, for example, have not been conquered, right? Like they've always belonged. I mean, there's a Japanese took parts of China during World War II, but essentially, like the country of China has always hung on to like mainland China, and like the country of Russia, again, they were invaded by Napoleon and they were invaded by Nazis, but they weren't able to take that land from them.
Mhm.
And those are
Okay.
huge, huge territories of land. So those are
It's
Russia is
true.
by far the
The
biggest.
Russia's humongous, yeah.
Yeah.
Next would be all is fair in love and war. It's a very broad statement, but nonetheless has been the case.
Do you mean, can you explain that? Does that mean
Okay.
anything goes during war type of thing, or?
No, what I think that means is a good example to explain that is the Arabs didn't have their own, meaning there are several Arab countries, 22 or 23 Arab countries, but the Palestinians did not have a sovereign state with a flag and a government prior to
Yeah,
48.
yeah, that is
So
true.
so right. So they of course did not want to split the land, understandably so. Granted, with the Balfour Declaration, they were supposed to have Transjordan, which would be their state, which is a lot larger than Israel proper, and the Jews would have what you would call Jewish Palestine, which was a lot smaller, which is now the full map of Israel. I have an interesting video I want to show you regarding that, and ultimately the Arabs did not want that to be the case, and so they went to war against us, outnumbered us severely, and we won. They did so again and again
Just
and
to add
again.
a little
And
historical fact to it, I mean, this is not superficial, but I think it's pretty well known by historians that actually Russia helped Israel in like 1948 when they were surrounded by all sides and by the Arabs. But yeah, just want to add that in because it's a fun fact of history that not a lot of people talk about.
I'm not aware that they helped them with soldiers on the ground. If that's true,
No,
you
it
can.
wasn't soldiers on the ground. It was airplanes. They bombed a lot of shit.
Okay, that's. I'll admit I wasn't aware. I know Czech Republic provided weapons, but in terms of soldiers on the ground, for the most
No,
part,
no soldiers on the ground, just
right,
airplanes
right,
bombing.
right. I think, yeah, if people aren't willing to admit that it was an incredible feat by the Jewish people, that these earlier wars, the 48 war, the Yom Kippur war, 6-Day war, these are you just can't convince me that these weren't incredible feats. In terms of, so in that sense, we fought these wars, we won these wars. Now we get to dictate what happens. Now, my point here is the weaker side has options, and that weaker side can now decide to continue fighting us, which they've been doing, or they can continue, or they can agree to the lands that they currently have. Now, the West Bank is complicated. The West Bank is very complex, but Gaza was given to them in 2005. So, of course, it's not ideal for them, because in an ideal circumstance, they'd have the whole thing. And either most of us would leave, most of the Jews would leave, and anyone that's pro-Israel, so it would probably include the Druze as well, because they've been on our side for all this time, and anyone else who's been
I
serving
think like
military.
most at this point in time, like most Arabs are not even like pushing for that. I think like from what I hear, like from what Saudi Arabia says and Jordan says, is they want a two-state solution of 1967 borders. So I think at this point in time, 99% of people have come around to the fact that Jews are not leaving Israel, that there's you're not going to get rid of all the Jews there.
Yeah, that's not the sentiment when you ask people on the street. I mean, maybe they're too afraid to say it out loud, but when you ask someone in Ramallah, the West Bank, Gaza, if they believe in two states, if they believe that the Jews should have a part in this plot of land, there's a resounding no.
But are they talking about in the land that's in Gaza, West Bank, or are they talking about like staying in Tel Aviv?
No, they think the entire thing is theirs. They think we stole all of it. There's no Jewish, to them, the idea that there was a Jewish presence there is irrelevant. The Quran is the main source of history, even though the Quran clearly states pretty much everything the Torah states in terms of the Jews being promised the land, but they have a different narrative. They understand it differently, and we can go into that.
The
So,
religious stuff is like I'll admit, like I'm not familiar. I don't know that much about the Quran. I don't know that much about the Old Testament. I think
mhm,
actually the guy Kareem would be a much better person to discuss that with. But he said what he says. I don't. Again, I'm just repeating what he says. Is
uh-huh.
that the Quran is actually does not in any way encourage or justify a lot of the shit that Muslim radicals do. It does not justify the killing of Jews. It does not justify any of that. Like, so again, just going off what he said, I've never read the fucking Quran.
Yeah, so there's
Uh-huh.
somebody I'm going to send you. His name is Doctor, because I'm not a Quranic scholar myself, but I know a Jewish guy who is. He knows he speaks fluent Arabic. He knows the entire Quran. He can cite verses. He's been in Al Jazeera in Arabic. He's debated Israeli. I'm sorry. He's debated Arab news hosts. He's a brilliant guy. He was on my show. I did a debate with him and two Arabs. He's a brilliant guy. Dr. Mordechai Kedar.
Okay,
So
yeah,
I'll
I'll
show
take
you.
him out. I think on both sides, like every religion has some fucked up shit. I mean, Christianity was cool with keeping a slave and being a slave as long as you don't kill a slave. I mean, like, like I think religious texts on all sides have some fucked up shit in it.
I don't
But
argue that. I don't argue
yeah,
that.
but
But the
just
thing
going.
is the thing is the biggest issue here is Christians and Jews have, for the most part, reformed, and there are many Muslim countries who have as well, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, but there are many of them who haven't. So of course, we're not gonna. I don't want to jump into too many rabbit holes, because I was gonna say, oh, people are gonna blame the West for them being poor, and because they're poor, that's why they're radicalized.
But
Okay,
that would be a
we
fair
know.
argument, right?
I don't think that's a fair argument, because there are plenty of poor Jews in Israel, and the lack of money does not bring them to radicalism. In fact, many of the poorest Jews in Israel are the ultra Orthodox, who many of them don't want to serve in the military. And it's not because they oppose Israel, meaning there are definitely anti-Zionists. The reason they don't want to go to the military is because they don't want to lose their religious. They're worried that if they go through the military system, they won't have an opportunity to learn as much, and they'll ultimately lose their religiosity.
Well,
Even
now they
though
have no choice, right? With the latest laws, the super religious have to serve now in the IDF.
that's supposedly the case, but I have to see how things unfold, because for the most part, the Israeli government allowed ultra Orthodox to
Yeah,
study.
it was up until I think very recently. But anyway, just going so sure, we don't have to go down the rabbit hole of what causes extremism. If the argument is Palestinians are more radicalized than all other types of Muslims, then I will agree with you on that. I think that's been clearly demonstrated throughout history. Now, again, there's a whole rabbit hole about why that is. We can disagree on that. But just going back to the initial question, because we're like going down 4 or 5
No, no,
different
no,
like
for sure, man. I was about to say that's why I prefaced that by saying I don't want to go down that rabbit
yeah, yeah,
hole.
we don't have to. We don't have
But
to. That's
yeah,
that could be a debate in of itself, honestly.
well,
But going back to the initial question, which I believe was about like when you have war and the side wins, they get the territory. That's the way of war, right? I think that that was the case for a big period of time. But the whole point of the United Nations and after World War II, it became changed that actually you don't annex parts of the other country. I mean, that's why, for example, the Ukraine war is such a big deal because Russia actually is annexing part of Ukraine, right? So that's just kind of like, I think that if America, I mean, the war in Iraq was controversial, but if America was going to annex Iraq, that would be a whole new level of controversy, right? There would be a whole new level of pushback. So the concept of annexing land when you win a war is not a concept that's been supported in international law and precedent since 1948, right? And I think rightfully so.
is
So yeah.
this the case? Just to interject quickly, is this the case? Are we talking about annexing a sovereign country, an established country, or is it the case regarding any land, even if
Well, I
you have?
think thinking any land doesn't belong to you, right? I mean, like the what's it called? The Donbass region of Ukraine is pretty complicated because it's generally ethnic Russians, and a lot of them want to be part of Russia, right?
Uh-huh.
It's pretty complex, right? But we look at that like this belonged to Ukraine, even though at one point it belonged to Russia, right? Like so, it's a
Right.
little gray. Putin uses the argument that well, this belonged to us, 30 years ago anyway. But I think
Mhm.
a lot of the world looks at that and like, well, at this point in time, it belongs to Ukraine, and you're annexing the land of another country, right? So that's just to answer. I think you're asking me more of a broad like philosophical question. And that'll be my answer to that. Is that I don't think it's common anymore, and I don't think it should be something that is common.
I don't think it should be the case. The Jews were ultimately given a state, which they then had to fight for. So at the end of the day, there were partners at play, and whether they were anti-Semites who made that reality happen or not I mean, it's definitely the case. But ultimately, I think land is going to be conquered until the end of time. Maybe at a lesser level than in history. I think humans are always going to attempt to conquer land, whether on purpose or by. Well, I mean, it's always on purpose. But
But
what I mean is,
aside from the war in Ukraine, when was the last time a country like actually conquered sovereign territory? Since World War II. Like when was the last time that happened?
I'm not sure. I can't. I would have to look it up.
No,
There's
there's
there,
been a
there
lot of wars since World War II, but conquering territory is like not common, right? Like nowadays, because again, that was just the one of the tenets of the UN was that like, hey, like there's going to be wars, but we're not going to like take sovereign territory from countries. But yeah, look,
it'll happen. It'll happen regardless. I also think I'm
it
I'm
probably
gonna.
will happen. Yeah, sure. I think the example I know is China and Tibet. But again, like the whole world obviously frowns upon that. But to kind of give credence to what you're saying, I don't like the pro-Palestine side, or at least I certainly don't expect Israel to go back to the 1948 borders, right? I think that if you conquer something a while ago, then it eventually becomes more or less, for all intents and purposes, your land. So I don't expect Israel to go back to 1948 borders. No one
It'd be a death sentence.
no one certain, but no one really seriously expects that. Even like countries like Saudi Arabia and Jordan, they talk about the 67 borders, not the 48 borders. So I get that premise, but I think that kind of what we were discussing, actually, I believe after the debate or maybe before over text, was that at the end of the day, you got two groups of people who are basically living on some of the same land, and they both need to find a way to live together. Like you can't, the Jews can't go away and the Palestinians can't go away, right? There needs to be some kind of reasonable compromise. So, Israel was attacked in 1948. Sure, they conquered territory. Yeah, that was a while ago. I think at this point, it's mostly, for intensive purposes, Israeli territory, but there still needs to be a compromise where both sides can get some land and have independence and have security assurances from each other.
As long as they acknowledge that Jewish rule exists, there may be a potential for peace. I think, and I also am willing to acknowledge a Palestinian ethnic group, although that wasn't the case up until Israel became a state.
I don't think they deny that Jews rule Israel, right? In fact, they would say
They absolutely do, Alex. Meaning, regardless of whether it's the case, it's clearly an objective fact. They don't accept that. There's a large percentage of the Arab world that does not see Israel as as a true state.
okay, we're talking about slightly separate things. I think I understand the point you're trying to make. They don't think it's legitimate, right? But they acknowledge that reality that right now Israel's controlled by Jews, but they just think that's illegitimate, right?
I get no, that's exactly the case. But by
Right.
not accepting its legitimacy, it's ultimately the same thing. It's semantics, meaning if they're not accepting its legitimacy, that to them it's not real. It's a temporary thing that will eventually fall, and they support, whether directly or indirectly, that the destruction of the state. And as Jews, we know that even if they say, "Oh well, just give us some more," the problem is after all these conflicts, giving the Palestinians more land hasn't proved to be a worthy endeavor, and I don't support that concept. And the reason I
Well,
don't
neither
support
has everything that Israel's been doing. I mean, like, I wouldn't say
also
that well, like, what do you mean, October 7th? Like, that was the policy successful? Like, why was there a massive terrorist attack? Why is there war with Lebanon? Why is there going to be war with Iran? Why already war with Iran? Like, we can't say that Israel's, under Netanyahu has been successful in its security goals, right? Like, the largest terrorist attack ever in Israeli history happened under Netanyahu's watch, which is more of a neocon type of, he runs things more like a neocon. So, just
what do you say that
because I mean, like because he says there will be no two-state solution,
there
because he does
shouldn't
not.
be there shouldn't be a two-state solution, Alex. A two-state solution is a silly idea, and I'll explain why.
Well, we can. I think that let's just save that tangent for a second
It
because I want
doesn't
to
hold
answer
on, but dude, okay, Alex, I hear you, but I'm this is my thing, man. So let me just we won't bounce around, but this is kind of relevant because we're bringing it up. The thing about the two-state solution, I'll be brief with this, and we'll head back. The Arabs will never accept that because this is a religious conflict. That's the problem. People don't understand. The
I would disagree
Western
on that part.
thinkers don't get this. They look at it from an agnostic or an irreligious or an atheist lens. This is a deeply religious conflict. When Israel is willing to give Palestinians parts of the country, they are saying, the Palestinians are ultimately saying, "Who are you? Who are you, colonizer, to give me part of my land? I want all of it." So for us to even suggest that not only tells the entire world that it isn't ours, which is part of our stupidity, but it also does nothing to actually bring peace. The only thing that will ever bring a semblance of peace is if the Palestinians accept that this country is primarily a Jew, the majority of the land is ruled by Jews, and for the foreseeable future will be. And the only way that'll change is if they defeat us militarily. And that's what they've been trying to do over and over and over and over and over. And the two-state solution is not a solution. All it'll do is give them more land. They'll take that happily, and then they'll continue to fight us for more. And that is just, it is so apparent because it's a religious conflict. And the reason why I meant the exact example I gave you of they're offended by the notion of us even offering parts of what they consider to be theirs.
Let
You get what I'm
me.
saying?
I understand what you're saying. I basically disagree with almost everything you just said.
Go
I
ahead.
think the most extreme example of Palestinians is Hamas, and even Hamas has said they'll lay down their weapons for a two-state solution on the 1967 border. Now you can say, "Oh, well, they're going to attack us anyway," right? But they're saying like, "Hey, we will stop if you give us the two-state solution." So, and they're like, again, the most extreme type of Palestinians would be
We should ignore their charter. We should just disregard the charter. Like they changed their minds. They don't believe what they believe anymore.
people do change. Yeah, I mean, like, what do you mean? Like, are you saying that if your argument is that this would be a valid argument, is that, well, they may say that, but then they will attack us. That's a valid argument, but that's why you need some kind of security guarantees. You need some kind of I mean, like North Korea and South Korea, right? They have a pretty intense border, but generally speaking, that border is respected. You would need some kind of like I think international I guess, supervision to make sure the border integrity is being protected by both sides. But the second thing you said is you're saying the two-state solution will not work because Palestinians want the whole thing. But again, I think that I'm sure there's some Palestinians who want the whole thing, but I think the vast majority of Palestinians accept the fact that there's going to need to be some kind of compromise and there's going to be some kind of two-state solution. I mean, you can look at the Arab Peace, I think it's called, yeah, Arab Peace Initiative in 1992, where they were willing to make a really reasonable compromise, right, that Israel just did not agree to. So I think that you need to find a way for both people to live on the land. If part of that deal has to be that the Palestinians have to officially acknowledge that Israel has a right to exist, I think that's fine. But that doesn't neglect a two-state solution. That's the only chance I see of both sides living together in semi-peace. Again, like I said, just to keep repeating this point, but the most extreme Palestinians have said that they will lay down their weapons for a 1967 border. And if you have security guarantees and you have some kind of international monitoring, then you can have that border integrity be protected, right? Instead of having a porous border. I mean, a big part of the reason why, October 7th happened is that there was a porous border between, between Gaza and Israel, right? For example, the border on North Korea and South Korea is not porous. That's a very strict border. So if you have a more controlled border, then you would have, you probably would not have October 7th. And that's why I think a lot of Israelis blame Netanyahu for that, because he moved a lot of those troops to the West Bank. But so, yeah, I just disagree with the premise that a two-state solution will never work. I think that it is, at this point in time, unlikely because both sides are too pissed off at each other. But I think that is the only chance for there to be some kind of peace in the Middle East would be a two-state solution where both sides have to negotiate and there's security guarantees and both sides get a little bit of what they want. Not everyone, you can't get everything you want in negotiation, but they get enough of what they want where they can say, okay. But again, right now you have cycles of blood. You have Palestinians very pissed off at Israelis, and then you have Israelis very pissed off Palestinians. So right now, a two-state solution is not feasible, but it doesn't mean it won't be feasible in 10 years.
No, I can pretty much tell you, and I say this just understanding as a soldier, understanding the region, being in the West Bank, walking the streets of Jerusalem, understanding both sides. This is too deeply embedded in both sides on a religious level for there to be a shared land.
But why not?
Much more so.
But do you think
Much more so on the Palestinian side? The Palestinian side would never, as a whole, accept it, even if technically 80% of Palestinians accepted it. That 20% would be so violently opposed. Mark my words, as long as we both live, you will never see a two-state solution. I don't want it because it doesn't help either side, even though you think it does. It just won't happen because I understand this conflict the way I do.
I think it's
You'll
extremely
see that to be the case, Alex. I have zero doubt you'll see that to be the case.
Yeah,
It will never happen.
Yeah, I think it's extremely unlikely because of the circumstance we're in right now. But we're talking about ideally what would be an ideal solution, not what is.
The thing is
going to happen.
Right. Because you're looking at it from a logical Western lens, maybe void of the belief in God, void of the belief in scripture. So if you look at it from an outward lens and you say, it's a piece of fucking land, just get along, share the damn thing, cut the shit out already. You're dealing with religious people. Many, by the way, Israelis are definitely more secular and free than Palestinians are. I mean, there's no question about it. And they are more open to it. The problem is every time you have these liberal Israelis that propose it, October 7th was a pretty quick reminder that it wasn't really, because the Israelis on the border with Gaza are some of the most liberal Israelis in the country. I think you know that.
Okay, not to get into October 7th because it's a whole different discussion, but would you say the Camp David Accords, it was a mistake for Israel to would you say that the Camp David Accords were a mistake for Israel to even agree to what they agreed to?
You're saying in terms of the West Bank?
Yeah, in terms of the two-state solution that was pretty close to happening if the Palestinians didn't pull out last minute. Would you say that was a mistake on Israelis' part to even go that far in terms of the Camp David Accords?
I don't think these are going to solve the issue. I don't think the reason why the Palestinians are pulling out in almost every deal, pretty much every single one, I think they've been offered 17. They've pulled out every single time
Well, Israel
because
pulled out of their Arab peace initiative, right? So there's been pulling out on both sides, right? It's been missed opportunity.
I'll look through it, but there's no disputing the Palestinians have said no almost every single time, if not every single time.
They have said no at times and some key times. Israel has also said no at other times. But so just once again, let me just get a clear answer to this. So would you say that Israel made a mistake by essentially agreeing to the Camp David Accords? Like, do you think they should have just like not agreed to what they agreed to? Because that was the two-state solution that was on the table, where Palestinians would get some of their land back, and there was going to be, it was according to Bill Clinton and a lot of people, it was the biggest missed opportunity on the planet, specifically because the Palestinians didn't accept it. So do you think that Israel should not have even bothered with the Camp David Accords?
No, I don't think it. I don't think I don't think it would have done anything long term.
So you think that they
I
should
think
not
it,
have bothered with
no,
it?
yeah, I don't think the Camp David Accords would have actually led to some any long term peace. I think it might have the actual arrangement of it would keep both sides busy. Would keep both sides busy, but in the long run, the conflict would continue. Absolutely.
Yeah, we just like totally disagree on that. I don't think a two-state
Okay.
solution will solve everything, but I think it would move things in the right direction. Yeah, I mean, what would you propose as an alternative solution? Like, do
Well,
you
the thing also, what would I propose in an alternative as an alternative solution?
like a better
The
solution? Yeah.
Jordan was supposed to be their state. I understand they're not going to do that, so because it's not realistic, they're not going to do that. Um, which I also find it crazy that the Palestinian refugees in Syria, Lebanon, and in Syria and Lebanon, for example, still don't have citizenship. I find that very strange. I think at this point they should probably give them citizenship. You have Ain al Hilwa, which is a Lebanese refugee camp, which is, I mean, it's completely destroyed. There's no incredibly poor. You have all these different terrorist factions. They're constantly fighting each other. They can't become doctors. They can't become lawyers. They don't have equal rights to their Lebanese and Syrian counterparts. In terms of what I propose, the Palestinians are going to have to accept what they have at this point. It's not fair, meaning this isn't a fair environment. A fair environment would be for Israel to have control over the entire thing. What they're thinking is these people don't stop fighting with us. They should go live in other Arab countries. So we can just rule this land, deal with our 20% majority. This is just the understanding because they don't see any other way. So they're thinking they should go somewhere else, unless they stop fighting, of course. But if they keep fighting us, that's what they should do. And then many of the Palestinians are saying, well, we would love for these Jews to just pick up and go somewhere. We don't know where, we don't care. Go to Mars for all we care, but they don't want them to be in the land. So this is what both sides ultimately hope for. And the likelihood is that if either side is going to go, the Palestinians are much more likely to go, and that's because of Israeli military superiority. And I can tell you for a certainty, if Egypt opened its borders along the Philadelphia corridor along Rafah, an enormous amount of Gazans would have left.
I'm sorry, I didn't really hear a solution. I heard you say a bunch of opinions, but what's the solution? In your ideal solution, in your opinion, like given the way things are right
Oh,
now?
I started by saying that they have to, if they want any semblance of peace, they have to come to terms with Gaza being their state ultimately.
So,
Okay.
like, wait, but so you're talking about like permanent occupation, like they just have to come to terms with
No,
that?
what occupation? If they stop committing attacks, if they have Gaza as their land, they accept it. We can help them build it. They've gotten billions of dollars of aid. They can build it. Believe it, there's still space because they tend to the Gazans tend to congregate in the north and center of the country of Gaza. There's still land for them to live in. I think Egypt should give part of the Sinai Peninsula to them to give them extra land, which they won't do. It's a desolate piece of nothing that Israel gave for peace. And so there's plenty of land that they can work with if they commit to not attacking us. They can come visit, they can work, but that's going to take time. It's going to take building trust again.
So you would say that Gaza pre-October 7th was an independent state?
It was up until they decided to attack us. We
So
gave
then
them.
So then my follow-up question, whenever anyone says that, is how is it that if they were an independent state, right? They were not occupied. How is it that Israel was able to cut off the water, the food, the electricity in like 24 hours, right? Like think about it, if America went to war with Mexico, we would not be able to cut off their water, food, or electricity, right? So how is it that Israel was able to do that so quickly?
Well, Israel gave them Gaza in 2005. They gave them greenhouses. They gave them all of these, economic opportunities. They destroyed everything. They
Well,
didn't want any. They
Hamas
didn't want to.
has, yeah, Hamas has definitely fucked up a lot of shit, and it definitely stole resources from their people. But Gaza was never given true independence. I mean, like Gaza was not allowed to trade with anyone but Israel, or I believe Egypt. They were not allowed to have trading partners. They were not allowed to have an airport. They were not allowed to have a port at any time. I mean,
Gaza. As far as I know, Gaza had a small airport at a point.
what point was that?
Pretty sure early on they had something. I have to check. I have to let me check it out.
Even if that's true, even if I grant you that at some point early on they had it, the idea is that they weren't allowed to have it for most of the existence of Gaza, right? Again, the borders were under
Mm,
Israel control. The fishermen couldn't even go out more than I think what was it, 5, 10 miles out to fish. I mean, they
Yasser
were,
Arafat International Airport, or simply Gaza International Airport, was a result of the Oslo Agreement of 1995. Funded by Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Germany, Japan, and Spain, it was designed and built by the Moroccan government.
and how long did that airport stay open?
Let's see. I imagine not long after '05. How long did the Yasser Arafat Airport stay open? Let's see. All of the facility opened on November 24th, 1998. All passenger flights ceased in February 2001 during the second Intifada. Israel bombed the radar station and control tower on December 4th, 01. Bulldozers cut the runway on 10 January
All right.
2002,
So
rendering the airport inoperable.
now,
Uh,
at that point, Gaza was not even a state, according to your own argument, right? They
I
were
don't,
granted.
I don't, I don't need it to be. To be honest, I don't. They, they keep fighting us, and then everyone's saying, well, you're blockading them. The same thing with the walls that went up, the checkpoints that went up. This is due to suicide bombings during the intifadas. So now they want us to take these walls down, stop the checkpoints, and just welcome these attacks. So yes, it's a chicken and egg issue. The, having walls up and creating checkpoints does create a system, a feeling of occupation, a feeling of conflict. There's no question. Of course, they're going to feel, they're going to hate having to go to work, having their cars checked constantly. The problem is Israel's not going to tolerate suicide bombings. So the only way for this to happen, being that Israel is the stronger power, is Palestinians have to say, hey, we tried to defeat them. We couldn't do it. We don't want to continue to sacrifice generation after generation after generation. It hasn't been working too well for us. Let's work with Gaza. Let's show the Israelis that we're actually serious about this, even though we would love to have the whole thing. We don't want to continue to sacrifice our people in trying to do so. We're going to have Gaza. We'll make it a beautiful piece of land, and that will be the best option.
Okay, but now we're talking about what ought to be, right? But let's just first try to agree on what is. You said that Israel pulled out in 2004, Gaza was an independent state. And so if you're saying, well, it wouldn't even make sense for Israel to give an independent state, that's a whole separate argument. But can we agree that Gaza was never a truly independent state? Given the fact that they couldn't have an airport, they had an airport well before Israel even pulled out, and then Israel destroyed that airport. You could say it was for a good reason, but it's a different thing. They didn't have an airport.
Yeah,
They were not allowed to. They were not allowed to fish. They didn't have control of their borders. They weren't allowed to trade with anyone but Israel. Israel was able to cut off all utilities within 24 hours. I mean, can we just agree that they were never a truly independent state?
were they never truly an independent state? I think up until they launched rockets, up until Hamas defeated Fatah, threw them off roofs, and essentially took over. Yeah, I mean, Israel knew it was coming. Israel knew it was going to happen. What I'm curious to know is how come you don't question the Egyptian occupation of Gaza or the Jordanian occupation of the West Bank?
I do. But now we're talking about a different thing,
No, no, no,
right?
I get it, I get it. But what I'm saying is why didn't they give the Palestinians a state? Is what? Why did when they had control over it? Why didn't they say, "Hey guys, why don't you make this Palestine"?
Well,
Why
just
did they?
because, yeah, just because Egypt did something fucked up doesn't mean Israel could do something
So
fucked up.
it's not about it, but it's a. You would think that their Arab brothers would say, "Hey, we believe in your Palestinianhood. Here you go."
Yeah, well, there's pragmatic reasons for this. Like at one point, Egypt did control the Gaza. At one point, Jordan did control the West Bank. I believe with Jordan, it was the. This is where like I'll grant a lot of the pro-Israel side is. I believe the case with Jordan was the Palestinians tried to assassinate their king, and after that,
Correct.
Jordan was done with Palestinians. I believe
Correct. Correct. And
Egypt, there was a
they kicked him out. Black
yeah,
September.
and I believe with Egypt, it was an increase in terrorism that happened in the Sinai Peninsula, which they didn't like. So I will fully acknowledge that the Palestinian people are more radicalized than any other group of Arab. That's fine. But just going back to, I just want to make sure we can
Well,
kind
but
of.
why do you is that Israel's fault? Is that would you put that complete blame on Israel, or
I
is
would
that
not. I would never put that complete blame on Israel.
okay? So why do you think that's the case? What are the Palestinians doing, or why are they why have they become those people? What has caused that to be the
I'd
case?
be happy to answer this question. I just want to make sure we can get to agreement before we switch topics because you raise a good question. But let me just really quickly, I promise you I will answer that. Just go back to the initial thing. Is that I'm just confused. Are you saying that Gaza was independent for like a year up until Hamas took over? You said they had their independence for a year, or they had their independence from 2004 up until October 7th. Like, what is because I the
No, no, no,
whole
no. The I have to look at exactly how long Gaza had a semblance of peace. Hamas took over very soon after.
yes.
So I mean, there wasn't. Do I think Israel knew that a radical group would take over? Did they when they did they know that Hamas would do what it did? Yeah, probably. I think at the end of the day, both sides think a few steps ahead. I think to say that no one knows anything, they're all dumb. No, because the reality, like I said, and this is why I made this case on
No
the
one's saying
podcast,
that. I'm not.
dude.
I'm not making that argument. I'm
No,
just
no, but
talking about.
the point is, Alex, the Israeli government they're not stupid, and the many Palestinian uh, military leaders are not dumb either, and I'll give them that.
No, no one is saying that. But that's a whole separate
So
argument. I'm just talking about if you can just acknowledge the fact that Gaza was never an independent state. Like they never truly got their independence.
I think if they didn't commit terror, they would. I think if
Oh,
they
okay, okay, that's fair. So you're saying that there's maybe a justification for why, but you will acknowledge that they were never
no,
independent.
but I think that's to the, I think that's to the fault of their leadership and to the fault
Could be,
of their desires.
and largely is, but just okay. I just want to make sure we
You
can
want
agree.
me to just acknowledge it for the sake of acknowledging it,
No,
sure,
just for
but
the
if
sake
we're
of
not going to
truth.
get into the reason, if we're not going to also acknowledge that their unwillingness to actually take that land and live in it instead of
I'll,
destroying, I mean,
I'll happily acknowledge that. That's a true statement too.
right, sure, I mean, you want me to acknowledge it, fine, but it's also like saying, well, do you acknowledge that there are walls put up in the West Bank and that's unfair to Palestinians? Yeah, I mean, sure, but why are they there? Like what? There's so many. That's the thing. It's like, oh, you killed 40,000 civilians. Okay, why is this happening? Why is this war existing? So
Okay,
I
yeah,
want
I just want to make sure if we can agree on what is before we get into what ought to be, because I think you were right.
there's no question that Gaza is not a state. It's not an independent state,
Okay,
and it may never be. I don't necessarily
you do
have an
know that's the
opposite.
argument. Sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting. Go ahead,
Yeah,
finish
go
your.
ahead. What are
No,
you
I was
trying?
just
No, I
saying,
was
but
just
that is a common argument the pro-Israel side that we gave them their independence, and they had independence from 2004, and then that's a common argument the pro-Israel side.
sure. I mean, if you elect a group which you've never been able to re-elect anyone else, because this is the case with Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah, and it's also the case with the Hamas leadership.
Dude, I hate Hamas
Uh,
as much as you do, right? Like I'll never like you'll never see me excusing Hamas actions, right? But I think we have to be acknowledged that this is a multifaceted issue instead of like it's cringe when the pro-Palestine side does it, but it's also cringe when the pro-Israel side does it, where they just put 100% blame on the other person. It's a complex issue. Yeah, I understand why Israel did what some of the things that it did. Other things don't really make sense. Like, why would you not allow a fisherman to go past 10 miles, right? But I understand why, for example, they would want control of the borders, right? And I think Hamas did do a lot of damage to the Palestinian people, a lot. They stole their resources. They put them on a trajectory that wasn't good. So yeah, for sure. But I think also at the same time, we have to be able to realize what played a role in electing Hamas. Just like we would need to, when we do talk about Hezbollah, we need to acknowledge that Hezbollah came into existence after Israel invaded Lebanon, right? So we have to be able to look at cause and effect. Like, for example, Iran is a huge issue, but America has a lot of responsibility on that on their hand, in England, because they initially overthrew the Iranian.
Right, but why did Israel invade Lebanon? See, the thing is these groups are threatening Israel's existence. The PLO is threatening Israel's existence.
The
And
PLO,
then,
or you mean Hamas?
well, the PLO in Lebanon. So
You
you're
mean in the,
expecting Israel to just accept that it has enemies that want its destruction on its borders, and then when they invade, that that enemy, meaning that, say, Lebanon, southern Lebanon, says, "Oh, well, we don't want Israel in our country." Okay, that's fantastic, but do you want us to ignore the threats on our borders?
No, of course not. Again, I feel like maybe you're just misunderstanding me, but no, of course not. Like
Okay.
I get it. Like it. Look, Hezbollah should not have launched those rockets at Israel, right? Of course, there's no denying that. But if you want to jump to that conflict, I think that there was a much better solution to invading Lebanon, and I think that Hezbollah, before this whole thing began, this was negotiated. Also, I think the America was the one who's leading the way in these negotiations, agreed to stop firing rockets, right, in exchange for a two-state solution. I'm sorry, in exchange for a ceasefire in Gaza, right?
That
And
is a horrible, horrible mistake. America is probably doing in. I don't. We'll keep this conversation. We'll keep the we'll bring the American aid discussion later into the conversation. But America saying not to go into Rafah was a massive mistake. America trying to get Israel to completely stop the war in Gaza is a complete mistake.
we
Absolute
would totally
mistake.
disagree on that, but we can cover that when we
Oh,
cover it.
absolutely. I'm more than happy to disagree with you, man. It's an absolute mistake. Israel needs to make a statement in the Middle East that this country will continue to exist and be ruled by Jews and its neighbors, many of whom have accepted it, whether they like it or not. They've realized that the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Jordan and Egypt, for example. Other countries in the Levant have not, and many of its citizens have, by the way. But a lot, some of them have, some of them haven't. Okay, and the ones that haven't still have a goal of destroying the country. So similar to other Arab nations, being that Arabs tend to be tribal, they understand strength and power. They work very differently than the West does. Arabs
Well,
understand strength. There's something that I, as an Israeli soldier, understand this. I know this about Arab culture. They're very warm and hospitable people, but they're also very tribal. And the most powerful tribe rules. This is how it works. This is why they don't have democratic. This is why they aren't democratic. They rule.
I agree with everything you're saying.
Right. And at the end of the day, when you bring a Western democracy into that region, they have an issue with it. But it's more so a Western democracy. The bigger issue is that it's a Jewish state. It's a Jewish ruled state. Just having Jews in the land, that may not be an issue. The biggest issue is that it's ruled by Jews, that Jerusalem is controlled by Jews, has Jewish police, also has by the way, also has Arab police, Muslim and Christian Arab police. It has There are Muslims and Christians in the Israeli army. I'm sure. I think you know that. I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
So
Um,
it's
yeah, just
fundamentally about the fact that Jewish people rule this land, which is extremely holy to Muslims, and they do not believe that the Jews should have rulership. This is the fundamental reason why we are fighting, because the Muslims in the Levant, to a large degree, and not all of them, you have gays in Beirut, you have liberal Arabs in the region. I have no doubt you have Arabs in the Levant that are drinking alcohol. They're doing all kinds of things that people in the West are doing, but outwardly they don't have the freedoms anywhere close to what Israelis and Americans have, or European countries.
but that's not
Right.
something that
It's
people.
it's very it's very relevant, because it's extremely relevant, and it's relevant
Oh, but
because
it's a truism.
they
Everyone knows
oppose,
that.
huh?
everyone knows that Israelis have more freedom than
but
people living in these Arab countries.
but
That's
the thing is the Arabs don't want that kind of government. They don't want this kind of country in the region. They don't want it.
yeah.
It opposes their belief system. They want to remove it, but they want to remove it from us from a cultural, a societal standpoint. But the fundamental reason is because it goes against their scripture, goes against prophecy, even though it really doesn't. it, that's the weirdest thing, man. Is the
Yeah,
Quran?
Kareem, I think, would argue against that. Again, I'm not familiar with the Quran, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that if we're talking about what
But I'm
Israel
talking, but also, yeah, okay. But Kareem's not here,
I think,
yeah.
yeah, sure. But I think your analysis is way too over reductionist, over simplistic. I think it's a lot more complex than that.
Okay.
And I think that Israel, in terms of what Israel ought to do, they need to act in the best interest of their people while at the same time following international law. And I think that these wars are actually not in the best interest of the Israeli people. Yeah, I think that keeping the war in Gaza going is not in the best interest of the Israeli people. There's a reason why the IDF has basically made a statement that, hey, we did all we can in Gaza. Like, it's time for a ceasefire, right? And the Netanyahu government doesn't want to go along with that. So I think that a ceasefire in Gaza is actually in the best interest of Israelis, because at the very least you get your hostages back. So that's a big disagreement
Okay.
with,
Okay.
but we can move to a different topic if you prefer.
So hold on. No, this is a great topic, though. This is a great topic because it's there there are Israeli military officials that still make very poor decisions, just like Ariel Sharon gave Gaza to
This is
Hamas
IDF as a
ultimately.
whole making a
He was no,
statement.
no, but I'm saying he was one of the best generals in Israeli military history, and he still made that incredible mistake. Um, and he also died from cancer very shortly after. He what I um If we agree to a ceasefire, say we get the hostages back, many of whom are probably dead, unfortunately. Say hopefully, God willing, we get all of them back. I think it's about 110, 111. I forget the exact number. We get them back. Hamas is still in power. They regroup.
Do you think that Hamas can ever be truly defeated?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I think a lot of people in the IDF would disagree with you. Some of the generals would disagree with you, and I think most Americans and military analysts would disagree with you. I mean, to give an analogy,
Why was why could Nazi Germany be defeated, but Hamas can't?
that's a good question. The rabbi asked me the same question. So here's the difference. Nazi Germany was a centralized government. So the Allies knew that they just need to get to Berlin. If they got to Berlin, the war is over, right? Hamas is a very decentralized. They're a guerrilla group. They're insurgents, kind of like the Taliban war. Why is it that America, after 20 years in Afghanistan, was not able to defeat the Taliban? Well, it's going to be the same exact reason, because they're diverse. They're scattered
So
and they're
okay, so
insurgent.
you dug
So
yourself in a bit of a hole, though. Okay, I have a very good answer for you.
okay, go ahead.
America has no standing in Afghanistan, meaning they weren't necessarily looking to take over Afghanistan and make it an American. I mean, they were enforcing laws and they were trying to change they were trying to change things on the ground, make it more democratic to an extent, give more freedoms, but they weren't trying to make it America number two. Okay, they had their own personal interests. Jews in Israel are living in a country that they've been longing to go back to for millennia. We're back in our home. In
So
do
you're saying
in
the plan is to conquer Gaza and like
No. My point is the attitudes are very different. So what I mean by that is Hamas also, although it's decentralized, they are the ruling body. No other group in Gaza is contesting that. You understand? There are other countries now that have multiple terrorist factions fighting each other.
yeah.
Hamas is Islamic Jihad. You have a small group of Shias in Gaza that fight alongside. They're actually the most extreme. You have a bunch of different groups, but Islamic Jihad and Hamas are the main groups. Islamic Jihad accepts that Hamas is the ruling body, so it may be decentralized, but they have rule completely. Okay, so in that, will the ideology be defeated? It can be. It's very difficult to do so, but we first need to establish military rule. What Israel needs to do is, for the next while, there's going to have to be military occupation in Gaza. Because if we simply pull out, so much has gone on in the last year. Understandably so, Gazans are pissed. Meaning, what I mean by
So the
that is
goal is occupation then, right?
because it has to be for the time being.
Okay,
If we
so
just pull out, no, but it has to be. They made a choice on October 7th to kill as many Jews as possible, If they would have succeeded, they would have killed every single Jew. They weren't successful. They weren't successful. And so they knew this was coming. I'm sure they knew this was coming. I don't think they believed they were going to. I'm sure some of the Hamas members thought they were going to take the whole thing over. I'm sure the leadership knew that wasn't going to happen. They thought they could do a bunch of damage, take some hostages. So hold on, I lost my train of thought.
Well, I'll give you props for acknowledging that the plan, at least for the time being, is
No, but
to
it
take
needs
over
to be.
Gaza.
It
But,
need
right,
but you're
sure, okay, that's an argument you can make. But I'm just saying that Netanyahu and the Israeli government would never admit that. They would say, no, that's not the plan. We're going to give it back. We would never,
I think they
occupy.
will, but
They probably will.
dude,
But I'm just saying that then you have to acknowledge that that Netanyahu and his government are lying right now.
are they lying? I think at the end of the day, it's military strategy. I think it's military strategy. I can say that. I mean, I think it's
Well, if they say that
is
no,
it
we're
is
not
it
going to occupy, and we're saying that's inevitable, then one of both of those things can be true, right?
mm-hmm. I mean, all war involves deception. War by definition is deceiving your enemy. So am I going to say that the Israeli government? I don't know what the Israeli government will do. What I will say is the likelihood is they're probably going to occupy Gaza for a certain period of time
I agree.
to ensure that there's safety on Israel's border, on Israel's western border. I don't think there's any other alternative. It would be an incredibly stupid decision to pull out of the Philadelphia corridor. Doing that would have been a disastrous mistake. This is Hamas. The Gazans ultimately have to acknowledge this.
Well, I'll give
Um,
you again. I'll give you props for acknowledging the reality that I think most people know. But it's not just about lying to your enemies, right? They're also lying to the U.S. when they say no, we're not going to occupy
Dude, the
Gaza.
U.S. knows exactly what's happening.
Maybe
Okay,
behind the
like,
scenes, yeah, sure, but we're talking about lying to the public at the very least then. And I think you said, well, there's no other alternative. One alternative I would propose is why not just really, really have a strict border? Why not like do what North Korea and South Korea do? We have a very, very secure border with fences. Why not do that? Couldn't that be an alternative to
say
occupying?
it again. Say it again.
Why couldn't you? So you mentioned there's no alternative to basically Israel militarily occupying Gaza. Well, an alternative
For the
I'd like to
time being, I want to be very clear though, because if you're going to say it, you at least let's think a little. Let's think a little more in the gray here. And my point is, they have to occupy it until the Gazans are able to come to terms with the facts on the ground. They actually acknowledge Israel exists as a state, and they're not committed to the destruction of the state of Israel. This is something they have to accept whether they like it or not. At that point, if they show us, we give them a period of time. This has to all be discussed. If in the next year or so, it probably will need to be more than a year, in the next year or two, you show us that you are not committed to terrorism, you are not constantly attacking soldiers, because the soldiers are going to be in Gaza for some time. You're not constantly attacking them. You are showing us that you actually want to live alongside us. Then we can, at some point, hopefully, even help you build. But if they're not going to do that, if they're going to keep attacking, and say, well, you guys have to take your soldiers out, it's like, okay, but it doesn't just work that way. You're the weaker side. Do you want to live with the stronger side or not? So you expect Israelis to believe you after October 7th. You expect Israelis to believe that if they pull out of Gaza, everything will be fine. They pull out of the Philadelphia corridor, you won't start shipping weapons through the Philadelphia corridor again. It's naive to just say, okay, we believe you. It's a stupid thing to do.
I think that would be a stupid idea. Can you give me 10 seconds just to turn on my AC and then
Yeah, of course.
I think it would be a stupid idea. I agree with you, but that's not what I'm
Oh,
proposing. Oh,
okay. I'm
so
listening.
just let me just address 2 points. So
Sure.
I just want to fact check myself on this, just make sure that I was correct. And the
Okay.
top Israeli military official says Hamas cannot be destroyed, right? A lot of actually IDF and even American generals have come out and said that. So I'm just your opinion goes against what a lot of the people in IDF and in the American military believe. But the second thing is you're
Because they're
talking about
talking about the ideology. They're talking about the ideology.
They're talking.
Um,
Well, Hamas is a terrorist group based on ideology. But what makes you think that, like, every time you accidentally or whatever, let's just say accidentally kill innocent civilians, that their father, their brother, their uncle doesn't just become more radicalized and join
Oh, I
Hamas?
don't doubt that. I don't doubt that, but the same is true to an extent about Israelis. So my point is as the weaker side, you're going to have to make a decision because what you're saying, I understand what you're saying, but then the alternative is, oh, okay, well, since we killed your family and you're going to be very angry about it and you're going to want revenge. We should just we should pack up. We should pack our
But
bags.
no, that's not. But that's sorry, but that's not the alternative that I'm proposing.
So
The
what are you
alternative
saying?
I'm proposing, yeah, is to have a very militarized border, like North Korea does with South Korea. I mean, there was a lot of bloodshed early on, but you have a very militarized border,
Does that
right?
include the Philadelphia? Does that include the Philadelphia corridor?
Sure. Let's just say he does, right? You
Okay.
can have a very militarized border, right?
Uh-huh.
Where it's not a porous border like existed before October 7th. It's a militarized border with fences and all of that stuff. And then you don't have to just trust what Hamas or Gazans say. You can have a border where they physically cannot get into Israel.
So
Like
let me ask you a question. Philadelphia corridor, that's between Egypt and Gaza. Wouldn't that be an occupation?
Egypt, okay, I misunderstood you. I was thinking of something else. I was thinking of North Corridor. Egypt and yeah, that okay, but I don't see why it would be necessary to occupy the Philadelphia corridor if you
Well,
have a very strong border on the between Israel and Gaza.
oh, well, do rockets fly through the fence or do they fly over the fence?
Does Israel have an Iron Dome?
Does it so do you understand how crazy that is? What other country is it? So we should just accept rockets as a normal thing.
No, I think there needs to be security guarantees on both sides, and I think there needs to be a way of protecting Israelis and protecting Palestinians. Right? I think that in the span of, I'm not justifying this by the way, but I think in the span of like,
Alex, there's no country on the planet other than Israel that has become accustomed to rockets. If the US was getting rocketed by was getting who knows
I'm not
thousands
no,
and
I think
thousands of
you're
rockets whether they had an iron dome or not. They have missile defense systems. America would flatten it. If they were getting rockets shot from Mexico, it would be gone,
I'm
finito,
not
finished.
I'm not saying that Israel should accept just having rockets fired
Okay.
upon, right? Like
Okay.
that's not what I'm
All right.
proposing.
Okay,
Just
so what are
try.
you proposing?
I feel like you may be misunderstanding me. I'm saying that there is a better alternative to a occupation of Gaza. I think that what you're going to have happen is if you have Israel occupy Gaza, you're going to have constant bloodshed between the soldiers and the locals. You're going to have a constant bloodshed, and I think there's a better solution. I think that by hanging on to the border, let's just even say that they take the Philadelphia
What's
corridor.
say let me ask you a question. What has proven to be, and I know the answer is so obvious. How many rockets have been shot from the West Bank into Israel?
I don't know the exact number.
Zero.
Well, there
So
was the second Intifada, right, which came from partially the West Bank, right?
sure, but Israel has it. The West, and I'm not going to sit here and say the West Bank is an ideal situation. It's the wild, wild West. I serve there. It's crazy,
But the
but
West
it is
Bank is ruled by
still
the PLO, which is a lot more less extremist than
it
Hamas.
is
Very different.
much better. It is much better than the
Right.
circumstance in Gaza. So I'm not that needs to be sorted. I don't disagree that that's a very complex issue that we have to hopefully figure out how we can coexist there. It's very complicated. But what we cannot do, Alex, is pull out of Gaza right now. The situation is way too tense.
But I don't think it
And
needs to be an instant withdrawal. I'm not saying
okay,
that. Of
all right.
course, there needs to be some kind of formal ceasefire. I think it should be a process, right? But I just don't think that even in terms of Israeli people, that having a semi-permanent occupation of Gaza is a solution, given the fact that a lot of military officials. I personally believe that Hamas will never be defeated because it's a insurgency group. You kill one of them, and five more become Hamas. And I think that just occupying will just cause more of the Palestinians, especially in Gaza, to become extremist. And you're going to have constant friction and violence between the soldiers and the people living in Gaza. And I think that's going to be a more bloody situation than a ceasefire and having a strong border.
All right. So how does that look? Like break down the strong border for me, because you did mention that we can control the Philadelphia corridor, because clearly Egypt was not doing their job
Well,
on the
I didn't
Philadelphia corridor.
say that I didn't say that you could. I'm saying that let me just grant that premise for the sake of the larger point.
Okay. And can you
Well,
give me a little?
I think the way it would look like is you would probably need to get Egypt involved in the ceasefire. Like Egypt would have to make security guarantees that it would not allow any weapons to come through the south border. I
They
think
made that guarantee, dude. They made that guarantee, and
you
they
need
didn't do a very
enforcement.
good.
You can have UN enforcement, right? You can have American enforcement. You can have not American, but you can have UN enforcement. You can. I think that yeah, the trust and then hope for the best is not the best strategy, but you can have some kind of verification. You can have enforcement of this. You
Alex,
can
I'm sorry, man, but I know you do a lot of research. You're a smart guy, but the UN right now in Lebanon, they've helped Hezbollah. UNRWA has helped Hamas. These groups are not doing much, if anything at all, to help the situation on the ground. I'm
just
not
really
saying they don't
quickly
bring
to
aid to
respond to the UN helped Hamas. So the evidence, I actually really deep dived into
UNRWA.
this. So the evidence for that was Israel just saying they did and putting a bunch of names on the list. There was no ever actual proof provided to the journalists who reported on that. But let's just grant that. They said about 12 of the people or so were involved in October 7th. UNRWA is about 30,000 people. That would mean like 0.003% of the 0.03% of the organization was involved October 7th. I
What do you
mean,
consider evidence? Because if they interviewed Hamas members, and of course all the pro-Palestinians are saying, "Oh, well, they forced them to say that," giving the so what are you? How are we supposed to prove it then?
oh,
They
you're
they
talking
interviewed
about
Hamas
the
members.
tortured, the ones that were tortured and then gave that confession after torture?
Oh well, of course you're not. Well, what if there weren't? Meaning, okay, so then what are we supposed to do then? My point is we showed video evidence. We question Hamas members. So of course you're gonna okay. Well, the
But
video
we
evidence
tortured
is
Hamas
fake. The
members.
video evidence is fake. The Hamas
No,
members
no one's saying it's fake, but it's well understood principle that confession get under torture is not accurate most of the time. Like those people were tortured. You can say that they should have been tortured because they're evil terrorists. That's fine, but the confession they gave under torture is not in any way a reliable confession. I think that yeah, look, if you say like, was there a few
but
UNRWA
they can't.
people
So how are they supposed to admit it? Because in Gaza they can't admit that the Hamas would kill them or torture them.
admitting it's about Israel providing some kind of evidence besides names on a list, some kind of photo, some kind of history of phone
They
calls,
showed they
some kind of
showed tunnels around the hospital. They showed this, and
talking about
I
something
wish
different.
I
I'm talking
had the
about
footage
UNRWA
in my
being
Google
involved.
Drive to show you.
No, I know they did, but I'm talking about UNRWA being involved in October 7th. What was the, just tell me, what was the evidence that Israel showed to back up the claim that there were UNRWA members who were involved in October 7th?
Well, they have pictures of IDs of
No,
UNRWA
they don't.
members who are also in Hamas.
No, they have names on the list. They don't have any photos of the UNRWA members crossing into Israel. They don't have any evidence for that. It's just basically a trust me type of thing. And I find it convenient that that accusation was made the day after ICJ ruled that Israel is plausibly committing genocide. Whether you agree with that or not, I find that to
Mm.
be a strange coincidence. But yeah, no real evidence was ever provided on this issue aside from torture confessions. But even if we grant that 12 of the members were involved in October 7th, that still means it's like 0.03% of the organization. And those people were fired immediately by UNRWA. I think probably because they just want to avoid the potential bad press. So you have UNRWA basically denouncing that if it did happen. So I just don't think that because of that, because 0.03% of organization who was immediately fired, is accused of committing war crimes, the whole organization is like no longer trustworthy.
I don't think. We'll have to do our research together. I'm not gonna. I do feel the one thing I would say is I do think Benny was saying things without having certainty, and so I'm not trying to be that person. I want to be able to say things that I'm confident about.
Yeah, sure. Look
I
it up. This
okay.
one,
One
unless
thing,
there's
one
some new evidence that
thing.
came out in the last like 2 weeks, that one I deep dive pretty
Yeah,
deep.
I'll have to do more research. So that's why I don't want to sit on that too much. But I
Sure.
definitely think, being that the Hamas, most of the Hamas members were not wearing military uniforms; they were dressed as civilians. Uh, Leads me to believe there's a high likelihood that these organizations were embedded with these groups, at least partially. Um, I want to talk to you about Sinwar's death. Right?
Mhm.
You mentioned radicalism. You mentioned that Israel killing Gazans will only lead to more radicalization. They'll continue to take up arms. What do you think is? Hold on one second. What do you think will happen with Iran? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts. what do you think Iran will now do? And do you feel like they're an issue? You know, kind of how Adam asked it. Do you think that Iran is an issue, or do you think they are just in supporting, the proxies?
No, they're definitely not just in supporting the proxies, right? Even the Iranian people hate the Iranian government. Uh, but I think the broader question you asked me is, what do I think will happen? Well, Israel's made it pretty clear that they're gonna, once they're done with Lebanon, they're gonna attack Iran. Most likely, they will bomb their nuclear facilities and their oil fields. I think, even though they told Biden they're not going to do that, I think that's probably what's going to happen. And then I think Iran will respond, and this will become a very bloody regional war that's not really going to benefit anyone. So that's what I think is going to happen. But do I think Iran is justified in its actions of supporting Hezbollah and Hamas? No, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm. So why do you think they're doing it?
Well, I think that they're worried about a Sunni Israel alliance. You have Saudi. I mean, the October 7th attack happened when Saudi Arabia was getting pretty close to signing a peace deal with Israel. So I think Iran is Shia and they support Shia proxies, and they just don't want a Sunni Israel alliance because that would basically make them.
Well, you missed one thing. Hamas is primarily Sunni. Hamas
Is
is,
it?
is yeah,
Is,
Hamas is pretty
is
much
that
all
really a
Sunni.
thing? Okay, I could.
Gaza is has a very very small Shia minority, tiny
Okay,
minority.
I'll just grant you that, but we can
You can
acknowledge.
look it up. You're welcome to look it
Sure,
up. But
sure.
yeah, it's
I'll just
almost
grant you
complete.
that.
Palestinians are almost completely Sunni, very small minority of Shias.
Okay, sure.
Uh,
I'll just grant you that. But can we acknowledge that Iran generally supports Shia groups that
yeah,
they're
yeah, sure.
okay.
Hezbollah is
Yeah.
primarily Shia. Houthis, I think, are also Shia. Hold on. Let me see. Houthis may be Sunni because I know Yemenis are primarily Sunni. I'm almost positive. Are the Houthis Shia or Sunni?
It's a Shia Islamist
Shia
political
Islamist
military.
political, right? But I'm pretty confident that Yemenis are Yemenis Sunni.
They might be, but we're just talking about Houthis, right?
Yes, yes.
Israel.
Yemen is predominantly Sunni, with about 65% of the population identifying as Sunni. We won't go down the rabbit hole of Sunni versus Shias, but the enemy of your enemy is your friend is kind of what that is. They don't want the Gulf states to make peace with Israel, and they're using the Palestinians as a pawn. What I think
Great.
something that I find interesting though is the much of the Arab world has been able to convince many in the West that this is a Palestinian Israeli conflict, when in reality, it's an Arab Israeli conflict. It still is, and even more so, it's a Muslim Jewish conflict.
Well, if it
And I
was
don't
a Muslim Jew conflict or Arab versus Israeli conflict, then why are the 20% of people who live in Israel who are Arab and Muslim? Why are they not? Why are they serving the IDF?
because they have a great life. They have a great life. They acknowledge it, and they're not interested. Just the same way you have Muslims in the U.S. that, according to hadiths, I'm sure you've heard of hadiths. According to hadiths in Islam, whether you like it or not, these are, I guess, what you would call the comparative to rabbinic texts. Many of which we won't go into the. I'm not going to claim to be a Quranic scholar, but this much I do know. They do have a goal in spreading the word of Islam, right? So in the US, you have a Muslim guy who lives in Jersey, like Trucker Sal, who lives in Canada. Well, he's Christian, so it's not a good example, but you have Muslims in Dearborn, Michigan. They have good lives, man. They're going to the clubs, they're having a good time, they drink alcohol. They live in the West, they have freedom, so they can choose. But
So
when
then
you
it's more
have
about quality of life than it is about religion, right?
but
That's what
right,
you're.
I understand that, but that's all part of it. That's all part of it. Because you can
Well,
say that the quality of life determines someone's religious level much of the time, but it's not always the case because there are very wealthy Muslim countries that have a lot of
sure.
religious Muslims.
Yeah.
It's really a question of how you view your religion. Do you take it at face value, or do you say, okay, well, there are violent components. I'm going to choose to follow the peaceful components. This is what this is.
Yeah, I don't think this is a religious conflict primarily. I don't think it's an ethnic conflict primarily. I think it's a national conflict. I think
Mm-mm.
that the Arab Muslims who live in Israel, they identify more with being Israeli than they do identify with their Arab side. I think that there's a lot, like for example, we saw that when Iran attacked the first time they attacked Israel, Jordan, for example, helped shut down those missiles. Saudi Arabia allowed their
Right.
airspace to be used.
Right.
So I don't think it's as simple as just like this is Arab versus Jewish thing. I think it's mainly has to do with a national thing. It's mainly Israelis versus Palestinians.
I'm going to disagree. I'm just going to say that there are certain Arab Muslims who have accepted, who genuinely accepted Israeli sovereignty and said it's actually pretty it's a pretty good thing to have this small tiny Jewish state. They're an economic superpower, they're a military superpower, they're free, they're for the most part just. They have
Oh,
fair court. No, no, I'm talking about within the country in terms of giving people freedoms of speech, press, religion. Oh, you can be a religion, you can practice your religion of any kind, you can have mosques, you have loudspeakers. Dude, in Florida I don't hear any Islamic loudspeakers, at least where I am, and maybe in parts of Broward I've never heard one ever since I've been living here.
I think we have a lot less Muslims in Florida than they
New
do.
York, New York, you hear it but very seldomly, not unless you're in a deep religious Muslim area. In Israel you hear the Muslim loudspeaker all over the country,
Do
in a
people living in
country that's
Israel? Sorry.
in
Do
a
people living
country
in
that, hold on, let me just finish this. In a country that supposedly hates Muslims so much, you in France they can't even wear a hijab to school. In Israel, which hates Arabs so much, women can wear a niqab, which covers the face as well and only shows the eyes. And that's a threat to us, by the way. That's something that poses a risk to us, and we still allow them to do that.
Well, I don't think Israel hates Arabs or Palestinians. In fact,
No.
I don't think that's a common argument. I've heard that argument. It's not a common argument on the pro-Palestine side. I think the argument would be that Israel hates Palestinians specifically, not just Arabs. Right? They have a
Not in
lot.
it's not an inherent hatred though. There's no, the thing is there's no doctrine, there's no Jewish religious doctrine that brings us to have hatred for them. And unfortunately, in the Quran, there are texts that say, the Jew will be hiding behind a tree. I'm sure you've heard this term, right? The Garquad tree. The Jew will be hiding behind the tree. There's one Jewish protective tree, and the other trees will call out and say, "There's a Jew behind me. Come and kill him." This is Quranic text, man.
Yeah, I'm just
So
not familiar with the Quran, so I
I'll
can't.
show, dude. We're sharing screens. We're sharing
I'll
screens.
just take your word for it. This is like well outside like my expertise.
But dude, the point here is here. Oh, 1 second.
And also, just to be clear, I agree with you that I don't think there's anything in the Jewish religion that causes them to hate Palestinians. In fact, I don't think Jews in general hate Palestinians, right? I think it's much more complex than that. I think there
Look,
are some Jews, like Ben Gvir and Smotrich, who hate Palestinians, but I don't think
no,
that
but
that's
by the way, I don't
that.
think, and I know you'll think I'm crazy for this. I don't think that they have inherent hatred for them. Also, they are of the belief of Rabbi. Have you heard of Rabbi Meir Kahana?
They've called them like what's it called, like human scum and shit like that. I mean, like,
Yeah, and dude, the Palestinians say just as much, if not worse, about us.
you see, this is like whataboutism. Just because Palestinians say bad things does not mean that then
Mm,
Ben Gvir and Smotrich say bad things that they're not bad, right?
I'm not saying that they're fine. I'm not condoning those statements. What I am saying is the overwhelming Jewish thought, not just Jewish, the overwhelming Israeli opinion is that if they stopped attacking us, we would have no issue with them. I implore you to go check out a
I
guy's
believe that.
page.
Yeah, I
It's
believe
called
that.
the Ask Project. It's called the Ask Project. This guy Corey Gilschuster, he's a Canadian Israeli. He's been doing this channel for over 10 years, and you should check it out. He's a liberal dude. He's an atheist,
I
and
think
he just,
Israelis are good people. I've been to Israel many times, and I agree with what you're saying that most Israelis probably feel that way, right?
they
But
don't give a shit. That's what people don't get. We're not. It's not a fund. The vast majority of Israelis, the vast majority, do not give a shit. Do not give a shit if Muslims are Muslim, Christians are Christian. They don't give
well,
a flying fuck. Most
you're
of them
kind
do
you're kind
not
of a
care.
move.
Most
You're kind of changing the topic now a little bit. I'm not. I've acknowledged all that. I think it's like I said, it's not a Arab versus Jewish thing. It's not a Jewish versus Muslim thing. I think it's a
It-
Palestinian versus
mm-mm.
Israel thing.
No,
And I agree with you that most Israelis probably want to live side by side with Palestinians, right? I think most Israelis are good people, but right now you have a pretty far right government in charge. Netanyahu, Smotrich, and Ben Gavir. I mean, you had Benny Gantz, who was a little bit more of a moderate. He pulled out of the coalition, so right now you kind of have the most extremists or so running the government, and they have a different perspective than what a lot of Israeli people do. A lot of Israeli people, I think the majority of it, if the vast majority of Israeli people, want to get the hostages back. But Smotrich himself has said getting the hostages back is not our primary goal. So just because
Totally. I'll explain why completely, and I'll explain why. I spoke to a guy, Yishai Fleischer. You should check him out. He lives in the West Bank, and he has a very fast growing YouTube channel. And I'll put it to you like this: I want the hostages back as much as anyone else. Now, of course, not as much as their own family, but I hope and pray that they come back. What I understand, though, unfortunately, is the biggest mistake was allowing that to become the case. And the problem with making returning hostages the priority is it allows our enemy to do that in the future, knowing that that is their biggest bargaining chip. The only reason why this war happened, the war is still going on, is because we have to take the hostages into account. And if Hamas or any other group, say Hamas is no longer in power and they have another group that takes their place, Islamic Jihad, for example, they understand that by taking hostages, they can even the playing field with a much more technologically advanced state. And so by negotiating with terrorists, we allow for this to continue to happen. And so what we need to do is we need to first finish our objectives in the war, which needs to be, whether you want to call it Hamas or another group, the Palestinians as a whole, Gazans as a whole need to say, Israel, we hate your guts, but we surrender. We're done. As a
you're not going to
whole,
get them to say that by killing like half of them, honestly.
dude,
I'm using
dude,
hyperbole because
dude,
obviously not half, but you're not going to get
they,
them.
dude, they if they understand, if Israel stays there, if the Gazans have any intelligence whatsoever, and I believe I'm not saying this to call them idiots. My point is they have to at some point, if they want to actually get along, ever, they have to say, hey, we don't like you. We may never accept you. We may never actually accept you, but we're going to throw in the towel. We're going to say, all right, listen, we'll have Gaza as long as you don't try to take that from us. And I think this is realistic, dude. I think if they are actually willing to take Gaza, turn it into something viable, turn it into an actual piece of land that they can build hotels, they can have beautiful. And they already had that, by the way. They had all this. It wasn't. If you've seen videos, it was a lot nicer than they purported it to be. And I love how they complained about it beforehand. Oh, look at all these amazing things we had. Israel destroyed it. Oh, I thought it was a complete concentration camp. I thought everything was gray and there were no trees or anything else. I'm not saying it was ideal, of course not. It was a lot nicer than they made it seem. Nothing like what like Norman Finkelstein would compare to concentration camps. Not even close. And
Yeah.
it is crazy to make that It's crazy to make that comparison, considering they increased what 20-fold, 100-fold. Hold on. One thing I want to say. I want to read this. The hour will not be established until you fight with the Jews, and the stone behind which a Jew will be hiding will say, "Oh, Muslim, there is a Jew behind me, so kill him." This is this is in it, dude. Like this is in it. There's no debating this. And
Yeah.
so
That is fucked up. I mean,
this
again,
is not my point. Is
Christianity talks about keeping slaves and being able to beat them with a rod.
but how many Christians are following through with that at this point?
But like again, sorry, my dog is just going crazy. But like
Yeah.
I agree that there's a lot more extremism on the Muslim side, and specifically a lot more extremism on the Palestinian side. I just want to go back to some of the things you said. Let's just do
Mhm.
like a little like mental exercise, for example. Let's say that you were born in Gaza. Let's just say you were unlucky.
Mhm.
You were born
Mhm.
in Gaza, and who are you the closest to on this planet? Your mom, your dad, your wife? I don't know. Who do you like the most?
Say I'm closest with my mom.
Okay, let's say that your mom was at the wrong place, wrong time, and she got blown up, right?
Mhm.
And let's say it wasn't even on purpose. Would you then ever forgive the country that did it?
No, I probably wouldn't. And the thing is I know exactly where you're going. I'm ready for it. Okay. You want to take this? I'm saying you. No, I probably wouldn't. I would probably, knowing how Gazans are educated, knowing the kind of their ability to speak out is pretty much non-existent. Even if I did, even if I was able to think critically and see behind the curtains a little, kind of peel some onions back and say, well, why is our enemy attacking us? I would just, of course, if I was a typical Gazan, I would say Israel's the aggressor, Hamas is my defender. I hate the Jews. I hate Israel. I want to kill
No, I'm not
everybody.
talking about you being the typical Gazan. I'm just talking about you just being a Gazan, right? I'm not asking you to think like the average Gazan. I'm just asking you to think like yourself. So would you
But isn't
say
that the am I, so how I'm why how am I not the average Gazan though?
because I'm talking about you're much closer with Israel, right, than you are with Gaza, or actually entirely more closer with Israel. So I'm asking you
Okay.
to think like yourself. I'm
Okay.
not asking you to tell me what the average Gaza would do. I'm just asking you what you would personally do. We're just trying like a little roll like a little
No, I'm
extra.
sure. Well, I'm trying to put myself in a Gazan shoes.
I
Yeah,
want
I
you
would
I
hate.
want you to just keep in your own shoes, but you just say you were born in like let's just say like this.
But
You
dude, you
were
have to hold on. But Alex, if you want me to think, you can't say think like a pro-Israeli Jew, but also think like a Gazan. No, I'm putting myself in a Gazan shoes to the best of my ability. I'm thinking, what would
let's
I
do a
think?
hypothetical. Let's say that you and your family are teleported into Gaza, right? You
Mhm,
cannot
mhm.
leave. You're stuck there. That's it. Let's just it's a hypothetical. I know it wouldn't happen, right? And one of the bombs, let's just say, killed your mom and killed a lot of the people that you love, right?
Mhm.
Would that make you more extremist or less extremist?
Oh, no doubt it would. I bet it would make me more extreme.
Right. So
Not in every case though. I wouldn't say it happened. I would say it happens in the vast majority of cases.
yeah, but it would personally make you more extremist. So then, therefore, the whole idea of keeping the occupation going, keeping the conflict going, would just drive more Palestinians to become more extremist. So, like
But I
that,
think that happens. Go ahead. Go ahead.
the
Finish up.
underlying thing you said is like, well, they need to just accept things are the way they are, but you're making that less likely by making them more extreme, right? Like if Gaza for Palestinians were not extreme, like a lot of them were not extremists, let's say they were extreme moderates, then you wouldn't have a lot of the issues you have now. But by keeping the occupation going, by keeping the war going, you're making them more extremist and thus making them less likely to basically acknowledge that Israel has a right to exist and all that.
When the major war, when the 6 day, I know for a fact when the 6 day war was over, Jewish soldiers could walk through Palestinian villages by themselves and they wouldn't be attacked. There was such a fear there in the earlier days of Israel. The wars were so powerful, they were so effective because there was such a threat to Israel's destruction that these wars were won quickly and decisively. The Arabs were terrified of Israelis for many points in the earlier history of the state of Israel. Over the course of time, Israelis started to say, well, maybe this, maybe that, maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that. The thing that I understand that many people in the West don't, and I don't say this from a racist point of view, many Arabs would admit this. I know many Arabs would admit this, and that because they have, is the Arab world, although very hospitable, they can be extremely warm people. That warmth also comes with incredibly high amounts of emotion. This is just part of, and this also exists in Mizrahi Jews as well, because they've lived in that region for an extremely long time. They're very hot blooded. Europeans tend to have a colder energy, a uh, colder character traits. People in the Middle East are very warm, so they can be very loving, but at the same time, they can also be very impulsive and very aggressive. You hear me?
I listen.
So, with that being the case, Arabs respect strength. Again, I'll say it. I just want to reiterate it because I acknowledge this. You go to an Arab country, they will cut up a cow, serve it to you with roses, and kiss you and hug you and
I've been to
give
Arab
you their
countries.
daughter. They can be extremely giving, but they can also do incredibly crazy things if they let their emotions get the best of them. And again, that applies also to an extent with Mizrahi Jews or Jews from. And I know I'm generalizing heavily because you have
Right,
people
you're
on all
correct.
sorts of spectrum. My point here, but let me just finish the point. The point here is that as Jews, especially Middle East Jews that never left the Middle East, they understand this because they have been living there from the beginning since they were kicked out of Israel. European Jews, who are usually the biggest liberals in Israel, do not fucking get this into their thick heads. And Mizrahi Jews continue to remind them, stop being dumb, stop being naive. If you give the Arabs an inch, they'll take a mile. If you show too much weakness, they will take advantage. And time again, they have been right over and over and over again. When you show strength, it tells the Arab world that this is our land, that we believe it's our land, that we're willing to fight for it and die for it. And they take a step back and say, you know what? The Jews are relentless. They're not fucking around. Even if we fight them 10 years from now, we're going to lay off the brakes for the time being. When
Well,
we overly appease, when we're overly apologetic, they say this is a perfect time. They're weak. They're divided. Now we're going to go in for the kill.
I,
And
I
this
don't
is this
I don't
is
think the solution is to be weak or to be overly, just give them everything they want, right? That's not what I think anyone's proposing.
okay.
You mentioned, I just want to touch on two things. You mentioned that that basically once the Arabs fear you, right, they're going to be less likely to try some shit. Well, Israel
It's
has
a
been
respect. It's a respect. Whether they like us or not, they respect strength.
okay.
The Middle East respects strength.
Okay,
Absolutely.
sure. But then if that was true, then why is it that after Israel has been doing a very, very, I'd say, strong attack of Gaza, just to put it mildly, I mean, the death toll of Palestinian civilians is higher than the death toll of Ukrainian civilians. I mean, it's been a very, very strong war. They're
I have a
dropping.
great answer. I have such a
Right.
good
Why
answer for
why
you.
is it that Houthis are now starting to steal Israeli ships, now American ships after America got involved? Why is it that Lebanese started firing rockets afterwards? Why is it that Iran is also did an attack? Like if Arabs just respect strength, right? That's the main thing. Then wouldn't they, after the war in Gaza began, be less likely to steal Israeli ships, especially a country as powerless as the Houthis in Yemen?
I got a great answer for you, man.
Yeah, go
I got a
ahead.
great answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's because and this is going to be I'm going to give you some psychology and understanding, but if you can actually really internalize this, it'll make a lot of sense. Jews as a whole have not been used to the idea of ruling land for thousands of years. We've been subjugated, we've been persecuted, we've been minorities in other countries for the longest time, and that's what we've been used to, and that's what the rest of the world has been used to viewing Jews as a group, a minority who sometimes were very successful, sometimes did incredibly well economically, but whenever they wanted, the host country could say, we're tired of you, you're ruining our country, we're going to blame you for all our problems, we're either expelling you or killing you. And so that became the norm. Up until recent history, Jews actually started to rule a country, built a formidable military, built a powerful economy, technologically advanced country, and this is a fairly new concept. And as such, many Jews, especially the Ashkenazi Jews, even though they founded the country and they're extremely they're I mean, without them, there probably wouldn't be a state today. But over the course of Israel's history, they've become very liberal. They didn't understand that the region works very differently than it does in the West. Um, and the biggest issue is not about how strong we are in terms of how many enemy civilians are killed. It's about the fundamental belief system among Israeli society. It's not about the number of deaths. It's not about how many countries we bomb. It's about saying something with your chest and meaning it. It's about Israeli leaders saying, as a collective, no matter where they stand in government, this is Jewish ruled land. We're fighting for it till the end. Take it or leave it. We're not going to back down. And that's the end of it. But instead, throughout the course of time, you have this Israeli leaders essentially appeasing and apologizing, which tells the Arab world that this isn't a legitimate state. That this is what these incredibly liberal Jews don't understand, is that if you want to have a Jewish state on one hand, but you're going to spend all your time apologizing on the other, which one is it? Do you believe in a state or do you not? And so you're confusing the Arabs. The Arabs are sitting there saying, all right, Jews, you're strong. You built an amazing country. Do you believe it's yours or not? Because it kind of seems like you're not sure. And this is the problem. This is the issue. The Jews have to, if the collective Jewish nation believes that this country is actually ours, whether biblically or through military victory, they have to come out and say it. They have to be willing to offend people. We have to be willing to have people who hate us. This is inevitable. We're gonna have people who hate us, dude. I'd rather
Well,
have a
Israel has basically offended every country but the
That's okay,
U.S.
dude. You know what? I'd rather have a country, a Jewish ruled country with their own military, with their own sovereignty, and be hated by the world than have no country be at the whim of other countries and be loved by it. Because that's, if we need to have a Holocaust to be loved by the world, I don't want it. I'm good. I don't.
Yeah,
We don't need to be loved. We need to be respected. And being respected, people will do business with us. Let me just finish my one last thing.
okay, go ahead.
A Nazi who is likely going to prison and may have a sentence of 30 years. Do you think he's going to choose a brand new attorney who's a year in, or do you think he's going to choose the 40-year Jewish attorney who's been in the game and has killed it ever since? Who do you think he's going to choose to keep him out of prison, or at least lessen the sentence?
The second one?
Oh, why do you okay, but he's a Jew. This Nazi's going to hire a Jew?
Yeah, if he's the best man for the job, if he's practical, whether he's
Congratulations.
idealistic or pragmatic.
Congratulations. So the same point applies in the region. Arab countries such as Saudi Arabia may not have originally supported Israel, but they understood that instead of allowing their people to become radicalized, they understood that the Jewish nation is a formidable nation. They're strong, they're powerful, they work well together, they've created something special. And they said, you know what? Let's work with them. Let's do trade with them. Let's do business with them. Let's acknowledge their existence. We'll be better off as a result. And that's exactly what happened. And it's going pretty well for them. So I suggest that the rest of the Arab world does the same, and they will have a much better result. That's what I suggest. So is it ideal for them? No, the ideal is that they remove Jewish rule. Okay, good luck. You want to keep trying it? Good luck.
Okay, so let me just respond to everything.
Go
So,
ahead.
first of all, I think the vast majority of Israelis believe that Israel has a right to have a state, in the Middle East. So this is not like a controversial issue amongst Israelis. Like, do we deserve to be here? Do we not deserve to be here?
No, but it's the way that it's said. The problem is a lot of Israeli leaders that go on these shows, that go on these media, they go on Al Jazeera or what have you. They're afraid to. They come politically. They come overly politically correct. They say things they don't actually believe. They don't. Let me give you, I guess, an example. We have my phone. This is the source. This is what needs to be said. A lot of Israeli officials dance around it. They want to sound politically correct. They don't
That is
realize is
true. They dance
What they
around.
don't realize is the international community would respect them more. They may initially hate them first by admitting certain truths, but it would eventually say, you know what? The Jews are saying it with their chest. And if anyone expects to change their belief system or expects to kick them out, they're going to have to do that by force. The Jews have proven pretty well that we're willing to fight for what we have. And so Jewish leaders need to say this. Israeli Jewish leaders, non-Jewish Israeli leaders, what have you, Druze, the Druze in Israel. You've heard of the Druze, right?
Yeah, but wait, you just said
The
a lot.
The
Let me
Druze,
just
dude. You
respond to that
interview,
before talking about the Druze.
yeah.
Okay, okay. I try to write down most things. So let me just make sure I understand you correctly.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying that if Israel is more upfront about what they're doing and what they want, the international community will respect them more. That's probably
Well, hold on. What do you think that means? What do you think that means? Because it's a very broad, it's a very vague.
well, they're upfront about what they're doing and what they want. Like, hey, no, we actually are gonna at least temporarily occupy Gaza. That would be an example of that.
No, I don't know if that's, and I don't say that to sound like, oh, I don't know. I honestly don't know whether what the Israeli government actually has planned. I don't know what will
You
actually
said that's
happen.
the most likely
The
scenario.
most likely is, yeah, the most likely scenario is that the Israeli military is going to stay in Gaza for the time being. I don't know how long. It could be 6 months. Probably will be at least a year.
It will probably be a lot longer than a year. But yeah,
Probably,
so, so
probably,
you're
probably.
saying the world will respect Israel if they're more upfront instead of dancing around things. That's
That's correct.
true.
That's correct.
True.
Absolutely. Yes.
I
Yes. I
think
say
that's
yes.
true.
I absolutely
Sorry,
say.
sorry. Let me just finish because I can't keep all this shit in my head that I'm trying
Go
to
ahead.
respond to.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So that's probably true, but I don't think that would actually work in the favor of more peace and protecting Israel. If Israel was just to come out and say, "Yeah, we're planning on occupying Gaza for the foreseeable future," I think that would just piss off more
No, well,
Palestinians.
not say you. Well, obviously, that's not how you need to explain. No, but you don't say. If you say it like that, absolutely. If you explain the nuances and you peel back layers and actually give and at the end of the day, man, the problem is Israel does too much to justify. That's part of the issue. I'm not saying that Israel should do everything it wants whenever and not be held accountable. What I am saying is that most countries have done far worse in their history, and Israel is scrutinized under a magnifying glass when many other countries, Western democracies, have done far worse, and the countries that are not democratic are still doing far worse, many of them. But Israel is constantly under a magnifying glass. And the reason for that, I believe, is that fundamentally Jews are held to a higher standard. I believe the world does that. I'm not saying that Jews haven't done anything wrong and our shit doesn't stink, but I do believe that's the case. And I also believe that as Jews, we tend to justify. We're always explaining ourselves and justifying. And it happens. You think about it on an individual level when somebody is constantly justifying their actions, you see them as cowardly. You it's much easier to constantly criticize when someone says this is how it is, take it or leave it.
I think the
This is how it
Netanyahu
is.
government is the biggest example of like, I don't give a fuck. I'm gonna do what I want.
That's but it, dude.
Wait,
And I'll
wait,
tell
just
you,
wait, hang on. Sorry, I got
and
some of this
Alex,
shit.
believe me when I say this is going to have and I know the world doesn't see it this way. This is going to have the best chance. This is going to give Israel and the region the best chance at survival by showing their enemies that Israel doesn't fuck around. Is going to give us is going to give the Middle East the best
I think
chance.
Israel has already made that abundantly clear. But just to follow up on something you said, what Western democracy has done worse in the last, like, let's say 40, 50 years?
In the last 40, 50 years, okay,
Because we can't compare what happened 150 years ago to what's happening now. We back then we thought that it was okay to keep black
40,
people.
50 years, the United States. Well, we're talking Western democracy to Western democracy. I would say
Western
Afghanistan.
democracy, yeah,
I would
Western
say
democracy.
America and Afghanistan is pretty fucking bad.
You think that you're talking about after 9/11, or you're talking about when we helped the Mujahideen against the Soviet
The
Union?
Mujahideen, you mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. To be honest, dude, I don't know the numbers. I can't. I'm not gonna sit here and start refuting it. I'm gonna have to do my research, and you can tell me.
Yeah, I think that I think we generally hold Israel to a higher standard than we do like Palestinians or like Lebanon, because number one, Israel is, as you say, a Western democracy. And number two is that we give them aid and money, right? So we hold our allies to a higher standard than we would like
You know
Lebanon.
what though, dude? Honestly, you probably will think I'm nuts for saying this. I think the world has always held Jews to a higher standard, and I think it comes down. I think it comes down to Christians and Muslims kind of both saying, "Oh, you guys want to be you want to be the chosen ones? Okay, well, look at you,
I
look
think
at
this
you
is just
do
like
it."
a victim mindset though that some Jewish people have. It's like, oh, like we're this, we're that, we're hold to a
No,
higher.
no, no. It's not a victim thing. It's not a victim thing. I'm not the kind of guy that's gonna just label everyone an anti-Semite and just you said something against Jews, you anti-Semite. No, no, no. I'm open to criticism. I'm open to. You're welcome to criticize Jews in Israel. No, that's not a problem. I do think that the reason why Jews have been scapegoated time and time again is much less about the wrong they've done. I'm not going to argue that dude, they're bad Jews. Our shit stinks. I'm not going to act like it doesn't. But the reason why Jews have been persecuted considerably disproportionately more than any other group is largely because of that whole chosen concept, dude.
Um,
And I
I
think
think
that
it's more has to do with the fact that Jews were powerless for a big period of history, and also that
so were other
um,
groups. So were other
you-
groups. Why were Jews so disproportionately persecuted?
I think another reason I was going to add is because they also are generally more successful because they have higher intellect, at least Ashkenazi Jews, and I
Uh,
think there's an element of jealousy there. But they're also been a small minority, so they're kind of easy to scapegoat, right?
uh,
So yeah, I think there's reasons.
exactly why it exists today, my man. And
Just
it's because
hang on.
there's
What was
killing
going on 100
Jesus.
years ago is very different than what's going on now. Like again, 100 years ago, we thought Jim Crow was okay. 200 years ago, we thought keeping a slave was okay. Now, no one actually in America thinks that, right? Except for maybe a few people on X. So I think that attitudes have changed, and I do think it's a good idea for there to be a Jewish state. I don't have any problem with.
There's still rabid anti-Semites in the United States, dude.
Give me like some.
There's neo-Nazi groups in Orlando. There's neo-Nazi groups in northern Florida. There's tons of
Yeah,
there
but
there
name me one mainstream politician that is anti-Semitic.
Well, because yes, I agree that the United States as a whole does not tolerate this kind of behavior. But are we going to say that it doesn't exist
No,
in the?
of course, there's some, but there's always going to be some fringe people who are going to be anti-Semitic. There's always going to be some fringe
Dude,
people
I'll be
in
honest with you,
Israel
man.
who
I
want
don't
to kill
think it's
every
fringe,
Palestinian.
Alex. I don't think it's fringe. I think there are people that are blatantly willing to come out with Nazi flags um and salute Hitler and do all that blatantly in the
What
streets of
percentage of
Orlando.
Americans do you
But if
think
we're
would be
yes,
willing to?
if we're talking about how many people are not a fan of Jews but don't outwardly say it, that work for Jewish employees and sit down with their friends after and say fucking Jewish boss, I hate his guts. Yeah, there's probably a lot of them. And I
What
think
percentage of Americans do you think would be willing to come out with a Nazi flag? Just a ballpark.
very, very few, because they don't. I think it's not that. First of all, I think most Americans are good, and I don't think most Americans harbor anti-Semitic views. I don't believe that. But I think a lot more Americans dislike Jews, and it's not about Israel. I would say, okay, for sure that there are more because of Israel, because of this recent war. But I think there are a much larger percentage of Jew haters in the United States than you think.
What do you think that percentage is? Just ballpark.
What I don't want to go on guesses, dude, but I would say it's if
General.
we would, I'm sure the entire country, it's probably at least 10%, and I would say it's
You
probably higher
think
than that.
10% of Americans
Yeah,
just
I say that because a large percentage of the religious Muslim population may have an issue. I don't, but you're asking me what I think.
but
I can't.
Muslims aren't even 10% of the American population.
How many?
Like
What's their population percentage?
I think it's like under 5%. I'll look it up real quick. But
Okay. But again, dude, you're asking me to guess. Okay. So don't, you can't
you're
hold
but
me on a guess. But what I
no,
would
I'm not
say,
but I wouldn't hold you to an exact number. But I think the claim that it's around 10%, maybe it's 8%, maybe it's 12%, maybe it's 7%. I
dude,
think
I
that's
grew up, dude.
a
There's
crazy claim.
much higher number than we believe. That's my
Is there
opinion.
any evidence for that? Like, is there one piece of
Oh,
data
of
you could?
course. They track anti-Semitic incidents, especially in the U.S. They're tougher on it, but in Canada, in France, it's terrible. You know what happens in
So
France?
you're saying that they tracked anti-Semitic
Yeah,
incidents
of
and
course.
percent of Americans or something resembling that were committing
No,
anti-Semitic.
they don't track the percentage of Americans, but they do track the percentage, what the increase in anti-Semitic incidents is, of course.
And you think that when you extrapolate it, it just becomes somewhere around 10%. I just okay, we can just agree to
You
disagree.
can't hold, dude. It's not fair to hold me to that. You're asking me what
I'm
I think.
not
I don't
holding you
have
to
this
an
data.
exact percentage. It wouldn't be fair if I hold you to an exact percentage. Of like, haha, it's actually 8%. I'm just
No,
holding
dude.
you to a general ballpark.
The premise of what I'm saying is that it's higher than what people think it is, and I also don't think people give two shits either. Um,
Well,
and
hang
it's what
on.
it is.
Congress has passed laws. I mean, we recently passed a law in regards to it's been a while since I read it, but in regards to what it's something with college campus, I forget, but we recently passed a law against basically, oh, we broadened the definition of anti-Semitism. So denying I forget what exactly. I don't want to give specifics, I don't remember, but we just recently passed a law in regards to anti-Semitism. I think Americans very much do care about anti-Semitism. The vast majority of them. I would say if you're talking about
The educated ones that live in the major cities probably do. The ones that live in, I mean, I'm
well,
just gonna, I don't want to
former
generalize
politicians.
because there are wonderful people in the southern states, wonderful people in the Midwest. There's some of the most polite, sweet people, but the ones who a lot of time live in rural communities that aren't so highly educated, there are some in those pockets that can be very anti-Semitic.
I'm sure there are
It's really a hit or
some.
miss.
I don't
Some of
think
them
it's a
are
tiny
some.
percentage.
What?
I'm sure there are in every state some anti-Semites, right? I'm not denying their existence. I disagree with you on the scale. I think the scale is significantly
We
smaller.
don't, dude. We can agree to disagree. The fact of the matter is, until there's data, neither of us know. But just based on the balance of probabilities, seeing how history has been for the Jews, it's a fair guess to say it's probably higher than what we think it is. And the reason for that spans as far back as time, and it is primarily because of jealousy. And at the end of the day, the reason why Israel is scrutinized so much more than other countries is because everyone is looking at the Jews and saying, "Okay, Jews, you want this chosen, you want to be this chosen nation with this chosen country that you were supposedly gifted. You want us to believe that there's some truth to all this. Okay, let's see how you handle yourselves. Oh, you did this. Oh, You did. Oh, you beat up your ultra orthodox. Oh, you did this. You're not. You didn't cover your hair. Oh, you had sex before marriage. Oh, oh, oh. The world, the world wants to jump down our throats and say, well, if you want to be this chosen nation you claim to be, if you're not perfect, we're gonna call you out on every single thing. And some of those things are fair calls to make. Some of those criticisms are fair, but they're this has always been the case, and it's going to continue to be the case whether we have a country or not. If we're poor, we're made fun of for being poor. Hasidic Jews are made fun of for having curls and looking funny and having scraggly beards. The Jews that integrate are criticized and scrutinized for trying to be too much like everyone else. The rich Jews are blamed for being rich. The poor are rich for being poor. the again, the religious, irreligious. There's always Douglas Murray articulated this beautifully, but ultimately, no matter what direction we go in, people find a reason to hate on us. If we come up with a cure for something, it wasn't really for good intentions. It was for some other motive. Anything we've done was always to people who hate us was always done for the wrong reason. So we can't,
think you
no.
can't apply past mindsets to current mindsets. That would be like a black person
Oh, but
saying, "Well,
history, dude, history
well, I
repeats
think, wait,
itself.
wait, sorry, let me just finish. I think
Right.
that, well, I think that a lot of white people, or 10% of white people, are racist because look at how they treated us just 70 years ago, right? Look, there was Jim Crow. Most people, supported that, right? But that would be an unfair argument because, like, yeah, that was then, and people have evolved and shifted their perspective. I think in general, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, minorities were treated like shit. It wasn't just Jewish people who immigrated to America. It was at one point, it was the Irish. At one point, it was the Italians, right?
No
I think
doubt.
I
No
think
doubt.
there's a history of minorities or outsiders being discriminated against. But I think that a
Yeah, but
lot of
Alex, not
I'm not
yes. If
denying. Wait, I'm not denying that there's a small percentage of anti-Semitic people in America, and I'm not denying that in the Arab world it's a much larger percentage, right? But I think in America, where we live right now, I think the vast majority of people are not anti-Semites. I think there's a difference between making fun
who's
of.
that dude, by the way? I'd love to know because he
That's my roommate. Yeah. Uh, but
is he is he
I
is he
think there's a
eavesdropping
difference.
or is he eavesdropping or he just wants everyone to know he's
No,
been
no,
working out?
he's just living his life. No, but I think there's a difference between making fun of like those ultra religious Jews, which I will do sometimes too, right? Just because it's funny, and actually like hating Jews. They're not the same thing, right? Like you can.
Yeah, but Alex, you have a bit of a soft spot because you have Jewish blood. I think you have a little bit. You're also a smart dude. Let's be honest, dude. You're a lot more intelligent than probably the average human on this planet. There's a lot
Of
of
course,
fucking idiots. There's so many dumb people.
I agree.
And I don't say that because I'm some savant, but I mean, dude, the internet shows me every day that some people are beyond, they're so stupid.
I
And
totally
so
agree.
at the end of the day, most anti-Semitism comes from people who've never met a Jew, never saw a Jew, but benefit from Jewish inventions, Jewish tech, Jewish medicine, Jewish ideas every single day. You have all these pro-Palestinians that are talking shit on their phones, they're talking shit on their computers, that want to boycott Israel, but yet they're using devices that without Israel wouldn't exist. They're absolute hypocrites. They're living in countries that were conquered, but complaining about Israel conquering land. They're Arabs complaining about Jews conquering land, but yet they are some of the biggest conquistadors in Israel in world history. Literally spread Islam by the sword for hundreds and hundreds of years, and are upset that Jews kill people. Like
That is
they,
all true, but again, like there's a lot we agree on. But that's kind of getting into what aboutism. Like, just because that is true doesn't mean like
no, no, no,
that.
no. I'm not saying that they can't make criticisms. What I'm saying is first be willing to acknowledge what you have done, what your people have done, before pointing fingers. And the thing is so many of them deny it completely. So many of them. They say that Islam was never spread through the sword, and there's no compulsion in religion. Meaning, Islam has no compulsion in religion, and you can do whatever you want, and blah 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 blah. They talk from two sides of their mouth, and so at the end of the day, man, if you're not willing, the problem is a lot of anti-Semites, and being that the large percentage of anti-Semites, unfortunately, are in the Middle East at this point, at this current moment in time. Uh, Dude, I mean, you see, there are some people that I'm friends with. There's this guy, Sahar, who's on my podcast. He does debates, Israel Palestine debates. I'll show you his channel. Dude, these people know nothing, nothing. Like there are people like Muhammad Ijab, people like you study, you do your research. The average person in the Middle East knows zero, nothing. All
That is
they just they
true. But
there's
the average
there's
American
no
knows
critical.
very little, close to zero, about American political system. So that applies. That criticism
I
applies.
agree.
I mean, the majority of people can't name the three branches of government.
I
Come on. Yeah, there's dumb people on both sides, of course. But you're talking about like admitting hypocrisy, which I do think that Arabs should admit hypocrisy, right? But also, do you think that most Israelis, that I don't know if we have time for this because we've been going for a while, but do you think most Israelis would just admit that Israel has committed war crimes since October 7th? I don't think they would.
I think, listen, I also understand that there are Israelis that don't think that critically. Like in every country, there are people that kind of just believe whatever everyone around them says. I'm not gonna act like, oh, all Israelis think as critically as I do. Definitely not. I would say as a whole, though, your average Israeli, I don't. I will say this with my chest: your average Israeli is smarter than your average non-Israeli in the region, without a doubt. They have better
Well, because
educations. They
Jews are
have,
on average are smarter than everyone
and
else.
that plays a very big role
But that's
in
that's a
the.
whole separate thing. I'm just asking, do you think the
It's very
average
relevant. It's
you
very
could
relevant, actually.
well, you can be very smart and can be very delusional. I'm just asking, do you think
Sure.
the average Israeli would admit that Israel has committed multiple war crimes since the war?
Uh,
Yeah.
would the average Israeli admit it? No, they probably go into
Right.
a whole tirade of what the other side's doing.
So if Arabs should admit their hypocrisy, shouldn't Israelis admit also their wrongdoing? Like, shouldn't everyone just like why is this criticism one
Yeah, but
side?
that's not going to happen. I think, but that's also kind of a mute point. Meaning, like when I say it's a mute point, only because it's not what's going to solve the conflict. Dude, let me just break this down for you. I hear what you're saying in essence, but okay. So Hamas says yes, we raped women, we did all these horrible things. We're sorry, it was wrong. And then Israel says, shit, there was that one time where we shot a kid. We probably shouldn't have done it.
It wasn't one
The,
time. Let's not minimize
hold
it.
on, Alex. Hold on, Alex. For the sake of the argument, let's do this. We did our research. Fuck this 20. This 27 or this 115 things that we really shouldn't have done. That an 18-year-old soldier who lost his aunt on October 7th. He was really pissed. Fuck, that 18-year-old shouldn't have shot that kid in the head. It was really fucked up. We're sorry. We're sorry, world. We're gonna have this kid arrested as soon as he gets back from Gaza. And then Muhammad Al Fatiha is like, you know what? Really was fucked up that we hate the Jews so much. We really shouldn't have done those horrible things. We're gonna arrest, all these Hamas members that we, pushed into the Israeli border. It was wrong. We're sorry, world. We shouldn't have acted that way, dude. In what fucking world is that happening? It's not okay.
Wait,
It's
hang on.
not.
Now we're changing the argument. I'm not saying it's gonna happen. People never admit when they're wrong.
Should it happen, dude? What
I'm
country
saying,
admits
no,
these
no, no, no.
things?
But then hang on, you're
It's like
misunderstanding
saying
my
we should
argument.
pay back our debt, like America should pay back our debts.
No,
Come
no,
on.
but you're misunderstanding my argument. I'm
Okay.
saying that we, as outsiders, because we're Americans, right? We're giving criticism. If we're going to criticize Arabs for not admitting their wrongdoing, then shouldn't we at the same time criticize Israelis for not admitting their wrongdoing? Like, why is the criticism only one sided? Why is it only directed to Arabs? I think it should be directed to both sides because both sides have done wrong.
I think that's very nice. It's very utopian. I think it's very cute, bro. I
Not
think it's
utopian.
nice.
It's us as outsiders making a criticism. I think
Right,
to be
sure, but
intellectually
again,
consistent, we need to criticize both sides.
it's never gonna happen
Yeah,
because
but
you know
for
what? You
me
know
and
why
you,
that's never gonna happen? You know why that's never gonna happen? Let's be pragmatic here. It's not a strategically smart move for either side to do that.
you're just once again you're misunderstanding me. I'm not talking about Israel as a whole admitting that. I'm talking me and you as we're criticizing and we're talking about this conflict. For us to be intellectually consistent, if we're going to call someone out for
Uh-huh.
basically not acknowledging their wrongdoing, then we should also call out the other side, which is also
That's
not
fine,
acknowledging their.
Alex. Fine, that's fine. I like what you're saying, but also what does that do though? What does that ultimately do?
Well, what is this discussion going to ultimately do? We're not going to solve the problem by having a discussion. This is all an intellectual exercise.
I think our first of all, I actually think this discussion was very thought provoking.
It was, but we're
I'm
not going
looking
to solve. We're
forward to.
not. Yeah, no, it
I
was a
think
very thought-provoking discussion,
I
but we're not going
really
to
like
solve
how
any issues.
receptive you are. I think my points. I'm sure we don't agree on everything, but I think my points actually resonated with you. At least some of them did. I definitely think so.
Well, these are all things I already believed. I just
Well,
granted them because I already believed them.
everything that I've you don't. So I haven't brought any new points to your table. I think I have.
I think that the one thing I learned is I was under the
I think when
impression
you
that
listen to it over again, I think when you
I was
listen
under
to it
the
over
impression that
again, if
Hamas
you're willing to
was
be honest, yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like, I never have
Yeah,
any
go ahead.
problem. I've admitted publicly when I've been wrong on things, right? Anyway, going back to what I was saying is you're talking about like, yeah, well, how's that going to be productive? It's probably not, right? But nothing, even though you and I had a good discussion, it was thought provoking, it was interesting. People are going to enjoy watching this. Can you just acknowledge that this discussion will have zero effect on peace in the Middle East? Can we just agree on that real quickly?
I don't agree. I don't agree.
So you think that
I
this
actually think
discussion will contribute a little bit to peace in the Middle East?
I think if for example, I think there are things I said that are very true to bringing a semblance of peace. They did a
That's not
Jews.
what I'm asking you. I'm
What do
talking
you
about
ask?
this podcast specifically. Will it contribute even one iota to peace in the Middle East? Not if the things you said turn out to be true or if people realize the things you said. I'm just talking about us having this discussion.
I think it can
Will that
be.
change it?
I think this podcast. It's a crazy thing to say because it's just me, my simple self, my simple human self. Can I change the entire region? I don't know. I mean, I have enough. I have enough belief that one person. I mean, there are plenty of circumstances where one where not circumstances for lack of a better word there are instances where a single human has done a considerable amount to either destroy the world or change it in a positive way. So yes, I do think that you and I can have an impact in a positive way on the entire world. Yeah, I believe
You
that.
could, but
I'm
I'm talking
crazy
about
enough
what
to think
is.
that.
But no, I'm not
Yeah,
talking
I
about
do think so.
but I'm
I
just talking about
think
this.
that
But it just
this
the idea
podcast
that
as a
like
whole, yeah,
the
I
idea that
understand your
like
question, bro.
Hamas
Like,
is going to watch this and change their perspective, or like the
no,
far
of
right
course,
is going to watch it.
Hamas, of course not, dude. Hamas, of course not. This
But we
has to
need
come
Hamas
from.
to change their perspective for us to have an
No,
influence.
we need the Gazans. We need the Gazans as a whole.
Okay, do you think that people in Gaza are going to watch this and then change their perspective?
If they actually want peace, yes. But if they don't want peace, of course not. That's
Okay,
on them though. But Alex, what you're doing is you're not even giving them the acknowledgement that they have enough intelligence and
no,
enough.
I'm just being realistic, and I'm just acknowledging that the fact that while this was a good discussion, we're going to play zero role on actually moving the Middle East closer to peace. Okay, we don't have that kind of influence. We don't have that kind of power. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't have this discussion. I think
Alex,
it's
that's who you believe. I disagree, bro. You can call me delusional all you want. At this current point, with my small following, am I going to impact what happens in the Middle East? Probably less likely than likely. But the Jewish world is a very small world. It's very. You play Jewish geography, you realize how small the Jewish world is, and for an Israeli prime minister or a former prime minister to come across one of my episodes, it's not impossible at all. It's very, very possible. Is it likely? No, again, it's less likely than likely. But could Naftali Bennett be scrolling through YouTube and come across one of my videos? Absolutely. Could an Israeli political official come across one of my videos and watch it? It's absolutely possible. And
and
could
then
I
they'll
say
change their
something that resonates?
policy,
Huh?
like, and then they'll change their policy, like Yahoo or
How do you think? But how do
Trump.
you think things, dude? Let's be honest. Let's be real about this. How do you think things changed? If Hitler can do what he did, and Moses and Jesus and all of these figures, and I am not fucking saying at all that I'm anything like that. Okay, I'm not. God forbid, I'm definitely not Hitler, and I'm sure as hell not saying that I'm a fucking messianic figure. I'm just a simple dude. But what I am trying to say is that if I am able to get my points, or if I can articulate certain points in a way that resonate with many people, and these are points that can actually move the needle forward in a good direction, I believe that that can actually impact something. That's why I do it. I'm not expecting to change. What I do. Why I speak about these topics is not an attempt to change my enemy's opinion, which I believe could also be possible, at least with some of them. It's more to give the people on my side, to give Jews and people who are pro-Israel the confidence to speak up as well, to do their research, obviously, and speak up as well, and also for people who don't necessarily have an opinion to form an opinion. To people who say, I don't really know where I stand here, I don't really know much about this, I want to learn more about it. I like his perspective. I like what he has to
Yeah,
say.
look, can you and I influence the opinions of some of our audience? Absolutely. We can just disagree on this, but I personally believe that our this one discussion is going to play 0% role in
Okay.
having any kind of impact on the war in the Middle East,
I've
right?
done a lot more than one discussion, bro. I've done a lot more than one discussion.
I'm not
And I,
talking about your podcast as a
so
whole.
who does?
I was specifically wait, but now you're kind of like changing around what I'm saying. I'm just
No, I'm
talking about
just,
this discussion as a whole because the reason I brought this up is because the point you made earlier was like, yeah, but what is the point of us basically being able to criticize both sides? And I said, well, what is the point of us even having this discussion in the first place, right? If this discussion isn't going to change things, right? This is all just for us to be
no, it's
intellectual.
not about criticizing in the war. The reason it's a little different. Criticizing could have an impact. Getting people to just admit to things they've done wrong, meaning as a collective, as a government, as a country, not kind of a fleeting effort. It's not
Once
so
again,
likely.
that's not something I've even once talked about. I'm not talking about Israel admitting this. I'm talking about you specifically for the
Right.
sake of being intellectually consistent, just being able to give that same criticism to both sides. That's all I'm talking about. I'm not talking about Israel. I'm not talking about
Mhm.
Israelis. I'm just talking about you.
I think, I mean, dude, I think Israelis, being that it's a free country and they have the freedom to express their opinions, are very critical of their government.
It's not what I'm asking at all. Like I wish you would just engage in what I'm saying. I'm
But I
not talking
am,
about
dude. How are
Israelis
you?
because I'm not talking. You keep bringing this back to Israelis. I'm not talking about Israelis. I'm just talking about you just being consistent with your criticism and applying that criticism to both sides, both the Israel side and Palestinian side. Once again, not talking about Israelis as a whole, not talking about anyone besides you.
Oh, but that's I like it, but I don't think that kind of goes against human nature. For me to be, how do you even do that in practice? Because everyone's biased to an extent. Like everyone
Well,
chooses their biases, right?
just
So for
what
me
do you
to
mean?
be,
How you would do that is you would just take the criticism you're giving to the Palestinian side for not admitting their wrongdoing, and you would also apply that criticism to a lot of Israelis for not admitting their wrongdoing. That's it. That's all you would have to do.
mhm, mhm.
That would make you intellectually consistent if you did that.
I mean, I definitely think that. So you're saying that I don't criticize Israel at all.
No, not what I said at all. But can you try to steelman my argument? Just repeat back what I'm saying because I feel like you're not understanding me. Just try to steelman my position.
I totally am. I think you're saying to be as fair as you can and criticizing your own side as you criticize the other.
You put some words into it, but yes, I'm saying for the sake of being consistent to apply the criticism you're levying towards Palestinians and Arabs, and also levy that against Israelis.
It sounds wonderful. I mean, I definitely would like to believe I would try that, but um,
Well, it feels like you're not trying it at all. Like, no offense, but I feel like I'm like pulling teeth here. Like, I have no problem. I don't even think I have a side here. Actually, I'm probably much closer to the Israel side. I have a cousin right now who's in the IDF.
you're closer to the Israel side, dude. Really? Which
Well, I
side
have
have you been on the panel, bro?
Well, okay, if I have a choice right now between either Israel getting nuked and disappearing off the face of the planet or Palestine getting nuked disappearing off the face of the planet, I would selfishly pick Israel not to be nuked because I have family there. So that I have much closer ties. I've been to Israel like 8 times or 7 times, whatever, maybe 5 times, I forget. But when I was younger, we traveled there a lot versus I've never been to Palestine, right? But I just try to be consistent and apply the criticism that I would apply to Palestinians. I would also apply those to Israelis when they're appropriate. And this is a situation where it's appropriate.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm biased. I admit that, but my fundamental belief is that although there's plenty to criticize Israel on, I think Israel conducts itself as a state in a much better way than the Palestinian territories do. The Palestinian leadership does,
But why can't
and
you just say that, yes, sure, the Arabs are never admit their wrongdoing, but there's also Israelis who never admit their
there are
wrongdoing.
things I can admit to here. You want me to admit? I'll admit that in the establishment of Israel's statehood, there were things that um, the Irgun, the Lehi did that were terrible. They
Okay, it's a step in the right direction, but I'm not even talking about in the past. I'm talking about now in the war in Gaza. You didn't dispute the fact that there's been multiple war crimes admitted, and you didn't dispute the fact that most Israelis probably would not acknowledge that. So can't we just be, if we're going to be critical of Arabs for never admitting their wrongdoing, can't we just be critical of Israelis for also not admitting their wrongdoing?
sure,
Okay, that's all I
I
want.
think I mean sure, but I think it's so much deeper than that. I also think that the world scrutinizes Israel so much more than they do, for example, with the Syrian civil war, the war in Sudan, the war that was going on in Somalia, the war that is going. I think I mentioned, yeah, Yemen. All these other countries, the world doesn't say too much. It's in the news for a bit of time, and then everyone forgets about it.
But none of those countries are Western democracies. None of those countries are American allies. We
Mm.
would hold, of course, the country that we give. Israel is the #1 recipient of U.S. aid. We would, of
So
course, hold them to a higher
so
standard.
why is
Some third world
Ukraine
shithole.
right? So what? Okay, and you with Ukraine and Russia, why is that talked about so much less?
Well, because the Israel war is much more recent. Are you kidding me? Up until Israel started, this was constantly talked about, the war in Russia and Ukraine. It was constantly talked about, but now it's getting repetitive. It's getting boring. Israel happened much more recently, right? And if there's another war that started, then people will probably start forgetting about Israel a little bit too. But there was for 2 years, there was nothing but Russia and Ukraine.
No, they won't, Alex. No, they won't. Israel,
But this is just
any
like a victim
war.
mindset
eh,
that, like, oh, Israel, we have it so bad. Like, I just don't believe. I think
No,
like
it's just
I think
we
I
know
think Jews are better than that. Like than to like see themselves as victims.
it's not about seeing yourself. It's not about seeing. I don't think there's definitely there's definitely a concept. I would definitely agree that to an extent, some Jews do that, right? They'll kind of throw the anti-Semite card very very early on without thinking critically. I'll admit that. Uh, but I think Jews to an extent as a collective have a level of PTSD, just
Well,
constant persecution, especially Jews. Uh, I'm looking for the word. I guess you could say not ancestors, but grandchildren, or even children of Holocaust survivors. Dude, these people, like Holocaust survivors that moved to the United States or moved to Europe. I've spoken to children of Holocaust survivors, the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. It's very tough being raised by them. They're
no
extremely
one's
neurotic,
denying. Yeah,
super.
there's generational trauma for
So
sure.
the Jews as a collective, dude, are pretty. They're pretty traumatized. Like I'm not. It's not a matter of playing the victim card, but despite all of that trauma, as much as people like to say, like to label Jews victims, look what Jews have accomplished. Look what so many Holocaust survivors have done. Many of them have left the camps, created generational wealth for their families in the States and in Europe. Even they've
Well, just to be clear, I'm not making a general statement that Jews are
I would
victims.
say, if
What
anything, the
what I'm
Arabs are
saying,
so much more victims. The Palestinians are perpetual victims.
yeah,
This is how they live.
there's a lot of victimhood for sure. But I'm just saying that that's not. But that's not, I feel like I'm just keep getting misunderstood. That's not the point I'm
But
making.
Alex, you keep saying that, dude, and I feel like I'm giving you good answers, maybe not the answers you're looking for, and you kind of just push them away as that's not what I'm
I feel
asking.
like you're not responding to the points I'm making. That's what I
Okay.
feel is
All right.
my
So what do you,
question.
all right. So,
So the point, so I wasn't trying to like make a general criticism of Jews. I was talking about the logic that you're using, specifically just that logic, which is that Israel gets scrutinized so much more, and it's because they're Jews. That I feel like that's a victim mindset to have, and I don't feel like it's accurate. I feel like Israel gets criticized as much as any American ally would get criticized if France was doing what Israel is doing and waging a very bloody war. They would be also face massive criticism. I don't think this has anything to do with Israel being a Jewish
so
state.
what?
Right? I think it
So
has to
why in the
do.
world has Israel had how many God, what is it? 110. You know where I'm going with this.
I'm honestly not sure, but
Um,
talking about charges or what are we talking about?
Condemned in 45 resolutions, but I'm just looking at the point is Israel has been condemned by the UN more than any other country as a
But
collectively.
do you think it's possible that Israel has just done a lot of fucked up shit in the past? I mean, you've acknowledged some of it. If we
I
talk
do, but
about
more
if we're
than
talking about
more.
this, sorry, let me just finish this point. If we're talking about like, I'd be like a lot of pro-Israel side, like it's ridiculous. Netanyahu got an arrest warrant that's like singling him out, but Putin got an arrest warrant too, right? So I don't feel like we hold Israel to like a higher standard than we hold any Western democracy, especially one that is the #1 recipient. We consider Israel a special ally, not just an ally.
Right.
We give them more aid than we give anyone else. So I don't feel like they're being held to a higher standard just because they're Jewish. I feel like
You
they're being.
understand that that's not because but you make it seem. I hate when people make this point because they make it seem like America is just this selfless country that just
No, I don't
loves
believe that
Israel.
at all.
So what? Okay, so why would you make that statement? They're a special ally. What do you mean by they're a special ally?
There's
Because they're an
many.
arm. They do it for their America does it for their own interest, bro. They do it so they
Well,
can be an arm in the Middle East, and so that America can control the region and remain the power in that region. And Israel is used as an arm to be able to do that. So America funds Israel with aid, and in doing so is allowed to control what happens to influence the region, and that's why they do it. They don't do it because they love the Jewish people.
no one said that. I don't think. I think
Well, okay, well, it
America.
sounds like you're inferring that because you're saying, "Well, look what all America does for Israel. Look at all these
No,
wonderful
I'm just making
things."
a factual point that Israel is the number one recipient of American aid. That's all I said. I'm not
Okay,
talking about why. I'm just making a factual point. That's a true point. That's not, even.
and that's part of why Israel, and that's part of why I'm against it, by the way, because now then we have to, then everyone likes to jump down our throats saying, "Oh, look how lucky you are. Look what
Well,
wonderful, perfect America does for you."
Israeli
But in,
generals have said that without American weapons, they would not be able to get nearly as far as they did. So I think Israel needs American support and American aid. Even with Israel having a Iron Dome, when at both times when Iran was shooting missiles, it was America's ships in the area that shot down a lot of those missiles or a lot of the
yeah,
drones. So
and America, and without
Israel needs it.
America,
But also,
yeah,
I don't
and
think America has as much control over Israel. At least the Biden administration does not have as much control over Israel as they think they do. I think the Biden administration policy. Now, by the way, I'm a Democrat, but the Biden policy.
you're a Democrat still.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Oh, so you're voting for Kamala?
yeah, 100%.
Wild.
We
Okay.
can get into a whole. I can make
No.
a.
I'm not gonna do. I'm not gonna do
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not gonna do that.
But so I'm saying, but the Biden policy towards Israel has been utter humiliation. The Biden White House has been ignored by Israel every step of the way.
You,
I think we have a lot less control of Israel than we do, especially when we're not willing to apply economic pressures. But yeah, I understand that this is there's definitely things that Israel, that America gets from having Israel as its special ally. We get to have our airports there, and we get to have military there, and there's a whole host of benefits. We get to share
no, there's no
intelligence.
doubt about it. And
We
and
have a
and
whole host of
honestly,
benefits, but there's also that doesn't change the fact that they're a special ally.
Israel should stop. Here's what Israel should do. Israel is already one of the biggest exporters of weapons. Israel should develop their ammunition in their own country. They should be doing a lot more of their own manufacturing. They should do trade with other countries. Israel is a very, very capable and technologically advanced country, a medical innovator, irrigation, agriculture, etc. I don't have to say this; you've heard it a million times. The point is, Israel has been able to do incredible things. They've been able to make the desert bloom. They can manufacture their own weapons to a much larger degree. They can trade with other countries. There's a lot they can do. The truth is, they have to get off the tit of the U.S. because as much as the U.S. is giving them billions of dollars in military aid, it is also controlling what Israel does. So now
I think
Bibi
the
said, so
Biden
hold on. So hold on. Bibi said, don't Biden said don't go into Rafah,
and
but
Israel.
the likelihood is it's very possible that on the sidelines he said, "Listen, we just didn't want to take responsibility. We're just saying don't go, so the world doesn't jump down our throats.
That's
Do
probably
what
true
do,
too.
do what you got to do." Okay, dude.
Just
To a
name
large
me one
degree, to a
thing
large
that
degree,
America.
to a large degree, it's all a game. But the reality, though, is whether America and weapons manufacturing companies like Lockheed Martin want to make their money off of war. Regardless of all of this, Israel still needs to exist so Jews can have a sovereign state. Regardless of all these other factors, regardless of the fact that men men in charge want to be in charge and people with power want to be in power and they want to make their money. Regardless of all of this, and it plays a part. Israel still needs to exist. And let me articulate this better. In order for Jews to have protection and not constantly be persecuted as they have been throughout history, we still need a state, and that's what I believe.
I agree. Israel needs to exist. How long do you want to go for? Because that will depend on how much I.
No, I think we've covered plenty, bro.
Okay.
I think
Let me just give.
I was actually thinking that. I was actually thinking
Okay,
that.
yeah, yeah. Can I just quickly give my final thoughts on what you
Go ahead,
said?
man. Go ahead.
So I agree that Israel should exist, and I agree also that Israel should try to get off American aid. I disagree with the idea that during this conflict that the Biden White House has been able to control and limit what Israel does. I think I would challenge you to name one thing that Israel wants to do
Because they
that
don't really want to. Because the thing is, Alex, they don't really want to. Do you think?
that's
Let's
probably
be let's call
true.
a spade as fucking
But
spade.
that's but that's
Do you think non-Jewish American leaders give two shits about the Palestinians? No.
oh, of course.
Most Arabs don't give a shit about the Palestinians. They support the Palestinians because the Palestinians are fighting the Jews. Listen, we don't want to fight them. We don't want to fight Israel. We don't want to get our cities blown up. Listen, you guys fucking do it because we don't want Jewish rule. We still believe in Islam. Palestinians, you've been fighting them forever. Fucking go die for us. Get over there. The Palestinians are seen as lower than in the Arab world. There's a well-known thing. I'm not just spreading some conspiracy theory. The Palestinians in many Arab countries are seen as lower class. Okay, and
That's
so
probably true.
they don't
But
give a
but hang
shit.
on,
They
I feel
don't
like
give a
we're like
shit.
I feel like we keep I agree with that, but I feel like we're just like kind of changing the discussion.
It's a good way to finish it
I
off.
yeah, sure, but I agree with you that in reality, most likely, American politicians don't really give a shit about Palestinians. But I was just pushing back against the point you made earlier, which is that Israel is being controlled by America. In reality, I don't think Israel is being controlled by America. I think that
America is being controlled by Israel. You could say it, bro. It's okay.
no, not necessarily. I think that that Israel lobby has a lot of influence, so maybe to that extent.
And so
But
does the Qatari lobby. So do many other non-Jewish lobbies in the United States,
yeah, I'm not a fan of
who
any of
fund a
that.
lot more money to the who fund considerably larger amounts of money than APAC does.
The point I'm making though is that I'm just pushing back against this point that there's America during this conflict has been controlling Israel. I think Netanyahu said it best himself during his interview with Douglas Murray, which is that well, all the leaders of the countries actually support us. They may virtue signal like they don't, but they really do. And I think he was probably telling the truth when that happened. So I have no doubt that American politicians don't give a fuck about what happens, or at least most of them don't give a fuck about what happens to Palestinians. But I'm just pushing back against this point that
No, no,
Israel is being
that's the saddest part, bro. If we're being honest, there are probably more Israelis that actually care. I know that you might think this is nuts, but the more liberal Israelis probably give a shit about the Palestinians more than much of their Arab neighbors, and that's not
I think
because they have a higher IQ, they're more highly educated, and they're their neighbors, so they actually
I
want.
can envision all that, but just once again, just before we move to a different topic, I think that's probably true what you just said. But I'm just again, once again, just to quickly reiterate this, I'm pushing back against the idea that America has been controlling and limiting Israel, which I think in reality, America doesn't even give a shit about what happens over the Biden administration has just been virtue signaling every time he says he had a tough phone
Mhm,
call on TV.
mhm.
So I'm just pushing back against that idea. Also, I just disagree with this idea that I don't know if maybe you're saying this or you're making it more of a general point, but if America stopped its weapons support, Israel will be fucked. I mean, eventually, Israel has a capacity to.
Oh,
Uh,
well, right now, no, no, hold on. That's like comparing a mother who's breastfeeding her child and then just says, "Oh, no more milk." Yeah, I mean, you got to wean. Yeah, Israel's going to have to wean off of the tit of America. Yes,
okay,
to just cut it cold turkey. Yeah, Israel will be in a very difficult spot. One thing you don't. Israel is the Israeli military, Israeli intelligence is always multiple steps ahead of its enemies. It is incredible what people don't
well,
want
they
to. A
were
lot of
not
people,
ahead
our enemies don't.
On
Are,
October 7th. They were not ahead of them
I
on.
understand that. I understand that. I understand that. I think even the most powerful and capable militaries can be fooled, can be overpowered. I think no one's perfect at the end of the day. Um, but I also think that the Israeli military, regardless, even put in a very difficult position, the military feats that they have accomplished are insane. The pager attack, the brilliant missions that Mossad, uh, special forces units going. Dude, we're talking for a long time, so bear with me here. Crossing over enemy lines, the missions that Israel has accomplished. If you look through Wikipedia and other sources, it's mind blowing.
We can agree. We can agree on that part. I do think I would love to continue this conversation and get into the war crimes part and all that shit.
But you
But
got to go to bed. You have your bedtime.
no, I mean, like, why you want to keep going? I just
No, no,
got to
no.
get.
We're good. We're good, bro. I don't think, bro. Most people don't have the attention span to go more than 10 minutes.
I feel like we've gone for a while, but
No,
I'd be
this is
happy to
good, man.
continue this
It was good.
conversation
It
on
was
my
good,
channel or on your channel, whatever. There's
dude.
definitely
If you want
plenty
to
of
have
stuff.
me, if you want to have me on yours, man, I'd be happy to. Let me know when.
Sure, anytime.
Oh, the
We'll
only
coordinate that.
shit, because I wanted to show you a hat, bro. We were on screen share the whole time, and I didn't get a chance. Hold on a
I
second.
do gotta like wrap up soon because I am supposed
All
to.
right, so we'll wrap it up. We'll wrap it up.
But I don't mind looking at that like when we do our part two. Just save it. I have a bunch of stuff too that I'll bring up.
All right, dude. All right, I'm gonna log off. I'm just going to exit it out. It's a shame we didn't get to play these videos. Honestly, I totally forgot. So to all the viewers, I apologize if you made it this far. We'll have to do it on Alex's show. Thank you guys for watching. This has been another episode of the Soothing Semantics podcast. Subscribe, like, and share. You can go follow Alex on Playing with Fire on YouTube. You're also on, I imagine, TikTok, Instagram, everything else.
Yeah.
Okay, so you'll send me your links after. I'll drop them in the description. Dude, thank you for coming. I enjoyed this discussion.
Thank you for
And
having me. It was a really good conversation. I enjoyed it as well.
okay, dude, I think I think it was productive, believe it or not.
No, I think it was productive. I just don't know how much of an impact we'll have, but I think it's cool
I
for
think just between you
our
and
viewers to get together with our big brains and have big brain discussions. So I'm a fan. I'm a fan of that.
I appreciate that, dude. I think your brain is definitely larger than your average person. So that's
Thanks, man. I
cool.
appreciate that.
All right, man. Enjoy. I'll talk to you.
All right, buddy. I'll talk to you soon. Take it
Peace.
easy.
Bye.